Chapter 552. Beside the Daishui River, where killing cries were boiling, Chiu sat on the high platform. His face flushed red, and he didn't speak for a long time. Zhongling looked back, his eyes filled with anticipation. How is the ruler's side? He wasn't worried about Zhongshu. The outcome of this battle was decided long ago. The only difference was how much they obtained. Chiu opened his mouth to speak. Only then did he notice that his emotions were raging. He couldn't control himself, and at this moment he couldn't make a sound. He could only silently clench his fists, waiting for his emotions to calm down before he opened his mouth. The ruler has wiped out the mysterious cloud spirit sect. I heard that the 10,000 cultivators of the various sects were all killed. One sentence was like thunder, ringing out in the ears of Su Jingyuan, and Zhongling Chiu stood up. Tell this news to Hu Qinxiu and Chai Yuan. Order the entire army to know. Taking in a deep breath, Chiu eyes shone brightly. The ruler has used 70,000 cavalry to crush the 3 million elites of the Thousand City Alliance at the foot of mysterious cloud spirit sect. In a few days, they will be able to return to Gantian Mountain. Today, we will go all out to advance and not let the ruler down. The ruler has said that the generals and army will help him sweep Donglin. 3 months later, the ruler will establish a Gantian Mountain and ascend to the throne. At this moment, most of the 1.8 million troops of Gantian Mountain didn't know where mysterious cloud spirit sect was. They also didn't know that just yesterday, this Ling Yun sect was the true ruler of Donglin Cloud Continent. It was better for these words to motivate them. When his words landed on the high platform, many message talismans flew out in all directions. They turned into streaks of golden light and flew into the sky. Many messengers rode out and headed towards the vanguard, towards the tens of square formations that were marching in an orderly manner. In an instant, the wilderness was filled with thunderous cheers. The ruler has won. Thousand City Alliance, 3 million elites, 60% of them died. 1 million surrendered. Is this news true? Beneath mysterious cloud spirit sect? Speaking of which, the Donglin sects have lost. They lost to the ruler. If not, why would this happen? Haha, it was a good defeat. I knew that someone as talented as the ruler wouldn't fall for it and be schemed against by those rascals of mysterious Cloud Mountain. Sweep across the Cloud Continent. Within 3 months, we will unify Donglin. Fight, fight, fight. The sects have already lost. Who in this continent can match up to our Gantian Mountain? Today, I shall wield the 3-foot sword and cleanse the world for my lord. The clamor rose from all directions, and the chi and blood essence light that had already soared into the sky became even thicker. His aura soared into the heavens, and his fighting spirit filled the air. In front of the military formation, almost all the soldiers and generals had flushed faces and bloodshot eyes. His footsteps were even more steady, and he was even more duty-bound. He firmly believed that the army in front of him would be able to crush everything. No one could stop him. At this moment, on the other side, opposite the tens of thousands of square formations of Gantian Mountain, it was a different situation. The various city lords who were well-informed and had already learned of the situation at mysterious Cloud Mountain had already silently retreated from the battlefield. The smarter soldiers had already placed down their weapons and were retreating. It caused the millions of square formations to be broken into pieces, lacking the majestic feeling from before. The formation at the front also collapsed upon contact, some of them just throwing down their weapons and surrendering. Within the central army, Xiongyu was totally distracted, her eyes losing focus. There was no longer a trace of blood on her pretty face. Just as she received the news from mysterious Cloud Mountain, she was still arranging the troops, preparing to move step by step to safely retreat the millions of Alliance army troops from the battlefield. However, when the message talisman spread over, it smashed all her hopes, all her confidence into smithereens. Till now, she still didn't dare to believe that the news she received was real. Blood Cloud cavalry massacred millions. None of the 1,200 Taoist cavalry survived. Mysterious Cloud spirit sect wiped out, Shunxiao fell. Disbelief flashed through her mind one after another. At this moment, she was totally at a loss, until a few voices spread over from the side, causing Xiongyu to come back to her senses. It seems like the Donglin sect have really lost. It seems like this Donglin cloud continent is going to change. 1,200 Taoist soldiers all gone. 10,000 disciples all dead. The essence of the Donglin sect have all been wiped out. Blood-killed dual cavalry. This demon king was so ruthless. That kid, Brother Lien, sire, please be more careful with your words. That monarch might become our monarch in the near future. If you aren't afraid, you can grumble until he grumbles, but don't dirty our ears and drag us down. Hey, wanting to catch a wild goose, who knew that he would offend a lion eagle. It seems like that person from Gantian Mountain is destined to soar in the skies and look down on us. What are you planning to do after you return? What other plans can I have? Naturally, I will close my doors and defend. Wait for the time to surrender. That's right. The Donglin sects have all lost. Our East City Alliance army isn't their match. Who in the Cloud Continent can block their troops? No matter how unwilling we are, we have no choice. Can we still resist? We will be crushed to dust by the Gantian Mountain troops. That's good too. This chaotic world that has lasted for thousands of years has finally ended today. If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have come. We were all tempted by Ling Yun. That Yang Fan deserves to die. Yang Fan is just a mouse. That ruler is a dragon. How can a dragon and a mouse be compared? Their words were really disrespectful towards the Donglin sects. However, at this moment, be it Zhu Renquang or Yin Fei Bai, they didn't bother about all this. If it was in the past, such disrespectful words would have caused them to be killed or their entire race to be implicated. At this moment, the two of them were silent, their faces ashen white. Not only couldn't they attack, but they also had to be wary. The gazes from all around were like sharp blades, filled with unkind intent. There were even some people who were eager to try. At this moment, the situation had changed. Ling Yun's sect's strength wasn't enough to protect themselves. They didn't have any strength left to threaten the Donglin cities. In front of them was the Gantian Mountain army, which was forcing their way over. The situation was set. Gantian Mountain was destined to sweep the Donglin continent. Amongst these people, there were some who wanted to take the risk and take their heads to suck up to Gantian Mountain. At this moment, Zhu Renquang was like an ice sculpture. Who knows if it was because his heart was cold, but even his skin was ice cold. Since he started cultivating, he had never felt so cold before. They lost. He had been utterly defeated. When they met in Cloud Saint City, who would have thought that the dual meridian body trash with barriers from heaven would one day cause mysterious Cloud sect to fall and Ling Yun's sect to fall? After today's battle, Ling Yun's sect's most glorious days had passed. In the following days, they could only bitterly hold on under the pressure of the other sections. Yin Fei Bai was expressionless and didn't have much sadness. However, his expression was really complicated. That person actually had such skills, such combat strength, to be able to turn the situation around in the end. Senior brother, we can't stay here for too long. Things might change if we delay. Can we leave now? Zhu Renquang replied and came back to his senses. Then he laughed out loud, 2 streams of tears flowing down his cheeks. Although he was laughing, in the ears of others, it was filled with bitterness and desolation. A moment later, when the laughter stopped, he bowed towards Xiongyu. City Lord Xiong, the situation is set. There is no point in fighting here. Please allow me and my fellow sect members to take our leave first. When he said that, Zhu Renquang didn't wait for Xiongyu to agree. He rose into the air and headed towards the west, turning into a streak of light. The other Ling Yun sect people either rode on artifacts or stepped into the air to follow behind. The moment these few people left, the cultivators of the various sects all scattered. Yin Fei Bai was the last to leave. Before he left, he looked towards the east before rising into the air. He only left a long sigh that lasted for a long time. In a blink of an eye, only 10 over-city lords and some generals were left on the platform. They were all silent, such that one could hear a pin drop. until 10 breaths later, a laugh spread out from the corner, coming with so much confidence, but retreating in such a haggard manner. As they say, when the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. In the past, these cultivators of sex were like otherworldly experts. They were arrogant and bossy, commanding others around in an imposing manner. However, looking at them now, why do they look like dogs that have fallen into the water? Be careful with your words. Be careful with your words. Don't forget that there is still a Lingyun sect intersect disciple here. His words were filled with mocking intent. Xiongyu, who sat on the main seat, felt a chill down her spine. Zhu and Kuang had left, so what should she do? What should their blazing flame mountain and blazing bear race do? When she was useless, would they abandon her like a pair of worn-out shoes? At this moment, her heart was filled with unprecedented hatred towards this Lingyun sect. It even exceeded her hatred towards Zhongshu, south of Xiyun province, Shijie City region in the past. The Shijie City in the past had been leveled a few years ago. However, just 2 years later, a new city that wasn't any weaker than it had been built. At this moment, at the side of the city, a 150,000-strong army was quietly forming up on the plains outside of the East City. They were all 8 feet tall, and most of them had white hair all over their bodies. They wore exquisite iron armor, and the weapons in their hands were all sharp. Their formation was slightly messy, but it couldn't hide their strength and sharpness. Sure Fatian stood in front of the army, his brows tightly furrowed. Beside him was his Sure Dingyuan. The latter had a smile on his face, giving off a cold intent. Why does father need to worry? I have already asked around. Gantian Mountain is strong, but this Donglin cloud continent is still controlled by the Donglin sects. Since it is Lingyun's sect that wants to attack that Zhongshu, Gantian Mountain will definitely fall apart. Sure Fatian still didn't speak. He knew about this matter. It was because he thought about this point that he wanted to raise the flag of rebellion. As long as they struck the core area of Gantian Mountain, they would be able to heavily injure them. However, why did he feel uneasy in his heart? Sure Dingyuan seemed to have seen through his thoughts, smiling, that Gantian Zhongshu is indeed not a normal person. No wonder father would feel uneasy. However, the fame of Lingyun sect is something that I have heard of even under the cloud ocean. Father should know better than anyone else. Chapter 553. That Zhongshu of Gantian Mountain is indeed not a normal person. No wonder father would be nervous. However, the fame of this Lingyun sect is something that I have heard of even under the cloud ocean. Father, you should know better than me. Sure Fatian smiled and felt slightly more at ease. How could he not know about the Lingyun sect? It was one of the 10 shrines. A strong sect that could wipe out a country with one sect. In Donglin Cloud Continent, they were the leader of the righteous path. Pretty much all the sects listened to their orders. If this Lingyun sect wanted Gantian Mountain to die, then there was no reason for this Gantian Mountain to not fall. If the sects worked together, they could wipe out a country. How could a mantis stop a chariot? Coincidentally, at this moment, Sure Facian's pupils constricted as he saw 2 people hurriedly walking over. Taking a look, he knew that it was his brother Sure Luotian as well as the old priest Sherbin of the race. He couldn't help but hesitate. However, he could roughly guess why the 2 of them came here. For the Lingyun sect to personally send people to send these armor over, it shows that they're really sincere. That wind leopard and flame bear race being able to have such fame on the cloud continent, each building a huge city. Before this, the Seven-Tailed Zone family had the strength to sweep the world. Our snow lion race is in the top 10 out of the 100 races of the monster race. We might be able to rise up once more on the cloud continent and build a city. As he said that, Sure Dingyuan laughed coldly. Are we really going to wait a few decades for that little bastard to take over the race leader position? What maniac lion snow seal? Who are you trying to fool? Sure Fatian frowned. Actually, he had already made up his mind. Sure Dingyuan's last sentence dispelled the last bit of hesitation in his heart. Waving his hand, there were subordinates who went up to stop them. There were a few angry voices that spread out from there. There was Shirlawatian's scolding and Sherbin's pain cries. Shirfatian laughed coldly, thinking to himself, "Brother, brother, today isn't like a few decades ago." At this moment, most of the people in the race were his trusted aides. 10 years of race leader had built up his prestige. The entire race would only listen to him. This time, I had no choice but to offend you. However, if they could win this battle, their Snow Lion tribe would be able to gain a firm foothold in Donglin Cloud Continent and have a foundation that truly belonged to them. In that case, the two of you probably won't blame me. In the future, his name would definitely be written in the history of the clan. It was all because of him that the Snow Lion clan could return to the Cloud Continent. However, Shi Dingyuan touched his lips intentionally or unintentionally. He still remembered the humiliation 2 years ago. When Zhongshou left with Shi Ruolin, he sent people to break his teeth and cripple his cultivation. If it weren't for the Ling Yun sect cultivators secretly saving him and consuming precious injury pills, he would have died. He might still be a cripple even now. This humiliation was unforgettable. It was a pity that he was destined to never be able to personally take revenge. That Zhongshou would definitely die at the foot of mysterious Firmament Mountain. However, what he had the deepest impression of was when he first met Zhongshou under the Cloud Ocean, those few absolute beauties. Who knows whether or not he would have a chance after he took down Gantian Mountain. Since he couldn't personally take revenge, then if he could rape those girls, he would be able to vent this hatred, just as his thoughts were going wild and his stomach was starting to ache. On the path in the distance, a rumbling sound spread out. Shi Dingyuan looked out and instantly saw a huge army walking over on the greenstone path. Looking at it now, it was a blurry patch. Who knows how many people, vast and endless. Their formation wasn't orderly, but their aura was really majestic. It should be the Alliance army of Dongshao and Wudong City. As expected, they came at 7 in the morning. Although they can't be considered elite troops, their equipment can be considered elite. It seems like our Snow Lion race is still the main force for this battle. With these 400,000 troops, we can sweep along this path and directly reach Gantian Mountain City. As he said that, Shi Dingyuan scoffed coldly. What a joke that Zhongshou spent so much to build this path. Now it is being used by the enemy. Shirfatian didn't agree or disagree, raising his chin up high, since their Snow Lion race was the main force for this battle. Then he, Shirfatian, would naturally be the alliance leader. Naturally, the two people over there would rush over to meet him. The two armies slowly got close, and just as they were about to merge, on the path in the distance, there was an uproar, following which there were killing sounds, following which Shirfatian and Shi Dingyuan's mouths were agape. The army in front of them, which seemed really majestic not long ago, started to collapse. First, the two commander flags fell for no reason. Then, hundreds of Grade 4 Windrider foals charged out from the formation. They crazily galloped towards the Cloud Ocean in the west. Looking out, these people were dressed really extravagantly. They were obviously the upper echelons of Dongshao, Wudong, and Wudong City. At this moment, they were filled with terror like they were hurriedly fleeing. As for those hundreds of thousands of troops, they scattered into a ball and fled back to where they came from. Shi Dingyuan's eyes were filled with a lost expression. What part of the song is this? Why did the army scatter for no reason? Even if they were a bunch of mobs, they shouldn't have done that. To scatter without even fighting, what kind of logic was that? In the art of war, there was no such thing. Shirfatian only felt his heart pounding. He instinctively felt that the situation in Donglin Cloud Continent had some changes that he didn't know about. This was the weakness of the Snow Lion race's shallow foundations. News was blocked. Even if there was something huge, it would take a long time before they found out. Taking in a deep breath, Shirfatian's brows furrowed slightly. Men, go find those scattered soldiers and ask for news. Ask him what exactly happened. Instantly, over 100 cavalrymen galloped out and chased after the scattered soldiers on the road. In just a moment, a person galloped back on his horse. However, his face was unusually ashen white, and his eyes were filled with grumbling. It caused Shirfatian's heart to thud and sink to the bottom of the valley. Reporting to race leader. I have asked a close servant of Wudon City Lord. I heard that the Thousand City Alliance army has collapsed at the Daishui River. Also, at the foot of mysterious Cloud Mountain, the Gantian Mountain Monster King personally led the Iron Cavalry to break 3 million troops and trample over mysterious Cloud Mountain. When the news spread out, the generals all rebelled. Wudon City Lord died on the spot, his head chopped off. Dongshao City Lord Bai led his men to escape and escaped. The first two sentences were like thunder in Sure Fation's ears, shaking his soul so much that it nearly collapsed. He didn't even pay attention to the words at the end. Shi Dingyuan's body shook, pretty much powerlessly falling to the ground, trampling over mysterious Cloud Mountain, which meant that Ling Yun's sect lost. Following which he couldn't help but exclaim, "That was one of the shrines. How could they lose? What right did a small Gantian mountain have to go up against the 10 shrines? What right did that kid have to become the head of Donglin?" Numerous questions rose up in his head. When Shi Dingyuan came back to his senses, he saw that Shi Luotian and Shi Bin were already standing in front of him. At this moment, there was no one stopping the two of them. Their gazes were ice-cold and filled with a biting chill. Their gazes were like blades as they scanned the two of them. Shi Fatian sighed slightly, bowing deeply towards the two of them. "I have let you down. Today, I will let the two of you deal with me." Shi Bin shook his head slightly. He didn't let us down, but the entire Snow Lion race. If Gantian Mountain loses, then naturally today's matter is okay. However, after this victory, the ruler is going to sweep the Cloud Continent. Although the world is huge, my Snow Lion race won't have a place to stay. Shi Fatian kept silent and didn't say anything. Shi Dingyuan laughed coldly. "At most, my race will return to the Cloud Ocean. We will return to where we came from. As long as we are careful, Gantian Mountain can't do anything to us. In this cloud world, there are many strong powers. It won't be Zhongshou's turn to cover the sky with one hand." The moment he said that, the surroundings were totally silent. Everyone's gazes coldly looked over at him. Not only the two lion race elders, but even those close guards stared over in rage. Shi Luotian burst out laughing, his tone filled with cold, mocking intent. "My Snow Lion race obtained the ruler's pity, and it wasn't easy for us to see the light of day. Do you want us to fall back into eternal darkness?" Shi Dingyuan was slightly shocked. Only then did he notice that the people around had different thoughts from him. Even his father, Shi Fatian, who doted on him the most, kept silent. Although the area beneath the Cloud Sea is vast, if that monarch wants to kill us, how can we escape? This Gantian Mountain does have many powers that can go up against Gantian Mountain. For example, the Central Dynasty is 10 times stronger than Gantian Mountain. However, why would these people offend a ruler for a small Snow Lion race? Your words are amusing. Luckily, Rulin is here and is loved by the ruler, so when he said that, Shi Luotian suddenly pulled out a knife from the waist of a lion race close guard beside him and slashed over. Shi Dingyuan instinctively wanted to resist, but at that moment, the few people beside him all unknowingly used their strength to suppress him, causing his aura to freeze. A knife light flashed, and Shi Dingyuan's head was tossed up into the air. Shi Luotian's voice continued, filled with boundless coldness. "So, I need to borrow your head, to appease the anger of the ruler." Shi Fatian was at the side, his face like ice. He didn't interfere to stop and didn't go to help. Looking on as Shi Luotian and the few generals beside him worked together to chop off the head of his beloved son, he only felt a chill in his heart, ice cold. He also knew that if he wanted to answer to the ruler, just Shi Dingyuan's head was far from enough. At this moment, even if he wanted to go all out, he wouldn't be able to. In the entire race, there were less than 5 people who were willing to follow him. However, why did they lose this time? When Ling Yun's sect attacked, shouldn't it be like Mount Tai suppressing them? Why did it end up like that? Just as Shi Fatian was stunned, the news of Daishui and Gantian Mountain winning and mysterious Cloud Spirit sect being wiped out swiftly spread throughout the mortal world of the Cloud World and started to ferment. Zhongshou was like a statue, standing at the peak of mysterious Cloud Mountain. Chapter 554. He still maintained the same posture as when he killed Shun Xiao, not moving at all. The halberd pointed forward, looking really domineering. However, if his eyeballs didn't randomly roll around, this posture would be perfect. Unfortunately, it wasn't that Zhong Shou didn't want to move, but that he couldn't. The essence energy that he absorbed from Shun Xiao was simply too pure, so pure that Zhong Shou couldn't give it up at all. Naturally, Shun Xiao's life essence blood source and the inner pellet hidden within were also things that he coveted. It was something that any cultivator would drool over. The moment he sucked it in, it couldn't be stopped. The surging origin energy gushed from the tip of the sword like a surging river. It caused the meridians in his body to twist and swell up to the maximum. However, he was still unable to take in a tenth of it. He was like a balloon that had reached its limit and was going to burst sooner or later. Thus, the remaining essence energy was directed by Zhong Shou into the spirit channels of the Blood Cloud Cavalry Formation. First, he healed the injuries of these 4,000 people. However, he only used up 1 to 2% of it. Zhong Shou was helpless and decided to help them wash their marrow, train their meridians, and strengthen their bones. This process took a full quarter of an hour. Only 70% of the essence energy was consumed. However, at this moment, even Zhong Yuan and Yin Yang's faces were flushed red, looking at Zhong Shou with pleading eyes. Even these 2 grade 7 experts couldn't take it anymore. Zhong Shou was unable to turn his head, but he could feel those vengeful gazes behind him. Helplessly, he could only let these Blood Cloud Cavalry go. However, there was still 20% of the God Realm Essence energy left. If he gave up just like that, it would be a waste. Just as he was thinking about that, Lei Dong Tianqi, Zhao Yanran, and the others had already walked up the mountain. When the latter saw the situation, she couldn't help but laugh coldly. Did you say that Shui was cool and handsome? How long are you going to act cool for? Zhong Shou felt slightly awkward. However, at this moment, he felt an intense spread over from his left arm. He was delighted. Little Gold had woken up from its slumber. Without hesitation, he directed the remaining 20% of God Realm Essence energy into Little Gold's body. This little fellow was like a bottomless pool, crazily absorbing the divine firmament's essence energy. In the end, he still felt that it wasn't enough, as if he hadn't eaten his fill and kept complaining to him. Zhong Shou also felt his whole body relaxed. He put away the halberd and put the broken sword back into its sheath. As for Shun Xiao's inner core, he naturally accepted it. It turned into a golden liquid and sank into his qi sea. However, at this moment, he didn't have the mood to look at it. The first thing he did after recovering was naturally to release Xinyuan Irin from the space of the Lingjie ring. Irin blinked, her eyes filled with confusion. When he looked at the sky again, the pressure that was about to crush the sky had disappeared without a trace. Did Reverend Shun Xiao retreat? However, everyone was silent. It was still Tianqi who spoke. Just now, someone with great magic power made a move and concealed the secrets of heaven. However, Shun Xiaozhenren seems to have died. Xinyuan Irin was startled. How is that possible? That's a deity realm expert. Who killed him? To him, at most, Zhong Shou could chase Shun Xiao out of this world, and that would be not bad. This was also because Zhong Shou was too vicious, such that this person didn't care about the rules of the cloud world. As for the others, they all looked at the blood-armored youth in front of them with questioning gazes. Who else can it be? Zhong Shou's brows rose up, a little gleeful. Apart from me, who else can kill Shun Xiao? He is asking to die. As soon as he said that, the surrounding people were filled with suspicion. Zhao Yanran was originally thinking that this Shun Xiao was really killed by Zhong Shou. At this moment, she mocked herself. She was really crazy to think that way. This Zhong Shou really didn't care about his face to actually dare to brag like that. The other people all shook their heads. Xinyuan Tong was thinking that Shun Xiao's death was naturally caused by someone else, so why not brag like that? Anyways, it didn't cost much and could threaten the cities. As for those large sects, no one would believe it. Tianqi nodded his head slightly. World Protector Venerables, this time it is fair. If these outer region seniors can openly break the rules and interfere in our cloud world matters, then this world will become chaotic. Wouldn't this world be in chaos? There are many seniors from the various sects. Xinyuan Irin also felt the same way. Xinxiao's death could only be caused by the World Protector Venerables. Zhongshou was really lucky to win this time. Thinking about it now, Xinyuan Irin felt terrified. Her brows furrowed. Zhongshou, you should learn from today's matter. Unless you have no choice and are 100% confident, you can't force the enemy to the point of death. Zhongshou laughed involuntarily in his heart. It wasn't that he didn't have 100% confidence, but that he was being used as a chess piece. Although he was a member of Tsang Xingdao, why did he feel so unhappy in his heart? After this matter, after returning to Tsang Xingdao Palace, he had to find the sect for an explanation. Zhongshou smiled, casually tossing the blood halberd in his hand to the side. Zhongyuan, you will lead the Blood Cloud Cavalry on my behalf to conquer the sects. Any sect or aristocratic family that dares to be enemies with Gantian Mountain will be wiped out. Send orders to Gantian Mountain to attack Blazing Flame Mountain City with Qiu Tingzhu as the commander. Within 3 months, I will establish the country and ascend to the throne as king. Zhongyuan received the blood halberd and bowed. He led the 4,000 Blood Cloud Cavalry and galloped away. Jingyin couldn't help but open her mouth. Ruler has 4,000 Blood Cloud Cavalry and has few opponents in the cloud world. Donglin Cloud Continent will definitely be in your hands. However, Ruler loves the pain and suffering of the people. It isn't easy for living beings to kill less. Zhongshou didn't bother about her, following which he thought about something. That's right. I can bring this Governor Commander Kong back and order Chiu Wei to let her sit in the commander position when he goes out. Say that she is my concubine and will take charge of the army for me. Anyways, the more people know, the better. I will have to trouble Yinran. This was a sudden idea. Since he couldn't poach her, he had to sow discord. It could at least cause the Taishang to lose 10 years of luck. Kong Yao was furious. A stuffy feeling accumulated in her chest, unable to be vented. Her beautiful eyes opened wide as she stared over furiously. This Zhongshou wanted her to never return to the Taishang and also wanted to ruin her reputation. How could this person be so vicious? How could such a person be called the Saint King? How could he have that pure, white dragon energy? Her heart was filled with unhappiness. Once again, a wound appeared on Kong Yao's forehead. At this moment, the tyrannical luck change had already ended. Using a secret technique to look at it, although she still felt a piercing pain, it wasn't as bad as before. She would only lose a little lifespan, following which she was stunned once more. Why was this dragon energy so vast and much stronger than before? Like a blazing fire adding oil to a flower, it was originally vast and majestic. At this moment, it was surging and unstoppable. Like it had obtained some help. It had the strength to swallow heaven and earth. Moreover, it was so pure and flawless. It made Kong Yao feel like she was going crazy. The few saint emperors in the legends were all saints with noble morals. This Zhongshou killed the innocent and did all sorts of bad things. How could he be on the same level as the ancient saint emperors? Zhao Yinran giggled. Xinyuan Irin secretly pinched Zhongshou's waist. Zhongshou acted like he didn't know, stepping on the ground beneath his feet. He looked reluctantly at the thick spiritual energy after the spirit realm. Even after going through a celestial realm-level battle, it didn't suffer much damage. This spiritual house will be handed over to Kongqi sect. As for the spiritual landmines of the various sects, 7 Spirit sect will take 30% of it. Tianqi was delighted, bowing deeply. Ruler's word are like a mountain. Tianqi is really grateful. Thousands of years of hard work didn't cause Kongqi sect to grow much stronger. Today, a smart choice caused their ranking to rise by several spots. Shui Lingxiao laughed. Ruler is so kind. 7 Spirit sect will accept it. Zhongshou looked at everyone. only to see that Lei Dong and Jin Buhui's eyes were filled with emotions. They were really complicated, like they had numerous things to say to him. Following which he smiled, "Brother and Brother Buhui, please wait. Zongsho still has 2 things to do. If there is anything, we can talk about it when we return to Gantia Mountain. We will drink 1,000 cups and get drunk." Xinyuan Iren's heart moved. 2 huge matters, one of which was naturally Uncle Weiran, who had sunk into the Oblivion Cloud Ocean and whose whereabouts were unknown. As for the other, she didn't know. Following which Zongsho nodded towards her. He directly stepped into the void and stepped into the space gap. After walking 4 steps, he felt that it was really tiring. He was still in his body. His essence, energy, and internal energy were really strong. However, it was a little tiring to deal with the space changes as well as the various ripping and squeezing forces. As expected, he was just grade 8. It wasn't enough to walk in the space gap. After a while, he finally stepped into a world river. The space here was still stable. Just as he heaved a sigh of relief, Zongsho saw an old man waiting quietly with his hands by his side. With just one look, Zongsho knew that it was Long Ying. Although this was the first time they met, Zongsho felt really close to him. It was like the master and disciple had interacted with each other many times. It was really natural. Disciple Zongsho greets master. "Get up. I know that your show isn't a person who follows etiquette." Long Ying turned around. His voice was totally different from his explosive and loud voice. He looked like a scholarly old man. "Stop talking nonsense. I heard A.O. Kuan say that you once saw the world viewing instrument and the scenes of the absolute beginning." His voice was filled with impatience. Zongsho was delighted. He also guessed that his master should have such a personality. He didn't say anything more. Zongsho entered a state of calmness. A moment later, an illusion appeared behind his head. The core of the absolute beginning, the explosion that followed, the opening of a world, the formation of laws, all of it appeared. Although it was just an illusion, moments later, the void was stirred up and was really chaotic. Zongsho's forehead was covered in cold sweat, like it was really tough for him. In just a few breaths, the illusion had already ended. Then, he heard Long Ying's expression change. "This is the scene of the absolute beginning that you saw. How much lifespan did you consume?" Chapter 555. This is the scene of the absolute beginning that you saw. How much lifespan did you consume? Zongsho calculated in his heart before he smiled and replied, "Roughly 700 years. I only saw the scenes of the absolute beginning for less than a breath. Unfortunately, my realm is limited, and there are many places that I am unable to fully show." 700? That is half of your lifespan. Speaking of which, the rest of your lifespan was used on other places? Not bad. Your comprehension on the world viewing platform has exceeded my expectations. Even if I lose 1,000 years of lifespan, it is worth it. Long Ying said. His face was dark and sunken. Even I have benefited a lot this time. Many of my questions are solved. Many theories can be understood. Unfortunately, to merge the 9 swords into one, I'm still a little lacking. This dimness only lasted for a moment before disappearing. He smiled towards Zongsho to console him. "You don't have to worry. Your master has the ability to charge for the end realm. I have been delaying it to perfect my Tao. I didn't want to leave problems with my foundations when I reached the last step of the true realm. Now that I think about it, I was the one who was too greedy. In this world, how many end realm experts have perfect foundations? It is already not bad for an end realm to live forever. Who knows how many people dream of it? Today, I have made up my mind to wait another 20 years. At that time, no matter if I succeed or not, I'll put down all my thoughts and try to reach the Saint Realm." These words were long-winded. Rather than saying that he was explaining to Zongsho, it was more like he was convincing himself. Zongsho didn't say a word and didn't comment. Only when Long Ying finished did he say expressionlessly, "I once told Aokan that although I memorized the scenes of the absolute beginning, I couldn't comprehend much. However, in the battle with Shanxiao, I did gain some things. I would like Master to take a look and give me some pointers." When Long Ying heard this, he laughed involuntarily. To be able to fight with a God Realm cultivator when he was grade 8 was a rare opportunity. With Zhongsho's talent in the sword path, being able to comprehend something was a given. However, this kid probably still wanted to help him. However, with Zhongsho's current realm, how could he help him? Zhongsho didn't wait for him to agree, pulling out the half of the broken autumn sword and stabbing towards Long Ying. At first, this sword seemed to be light and without any strength. However, when the sword was unleashed, the spirit river in the world gap immediately collapsed. Just a little bit of the energy that leaked out was enough to cause this entire space to be wiped out. Sword Soul. Almost immediately, Dragon Shadow could sense that faintly discernible sword intent piercing straight into his mind. Zhongsho, 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 Zhong, Long Zhong. Zhongsho, sword. Although he didn't have much hope, he was looking forward to what Zhongsho comprehended from this battle. In the next instant, all the hair on Dragon Shadow's body stood up, and all of them stood up. This sword struck out, similar to the illusions from before. It was vast and majestic, like it could suppress everything from a source. It is the absolute beginning sword intent. Long Ying Zhong's brows rose up, filled with indescribable surprise. Zhongsho, this kid, could actually comprehend the absolute beginning sword intent to the soul realm. There were thousands of sword intents in the world, 3,000 Daos. However, even if one comprehended all of them, they might not be able to compare to such a Dao that pointed to the source. Joy surged out from his chest like a wave. Moments later, Long Ying Zhong couldn't help but exclaim, how did this happen? When the broken sword was halfway there, a light ring rang out from the sword body. Zhongsho's mind was really calm. In that instance, he suddenly entered a state where he was exceptionally compatible with heaven and earth. Under the connection between heaven and man, energy and soul merged and gathered on the sword. The sword in his hand seemed to be a point, but also like it had turned into a world. It also seemed to have broken through the shackles of time. After the sword slashed out, it charged right at Long Ying Zhong's throat. At this moment, his face was filled with an unnatural red flush. However, he didn't think much about it. He just wanted to merge all his comprehension, all his martial path achievements, all his spiritual cultivation attainments into this sword. A bright glow flashed in Long Ying Zhong's eyes. Without hesitation, he reached out with a finger and tapped the tip of Zhongsho's broken sword. Kung! Hong! First, there was a sharp ring from the sword body shaking, and then there was an explosion. The broken autumn sword instantly exploded into thousands of fragments and scattered in all directions. Zhongsho spat out a mouthful of fresh blood and retreated tens of feet. It wasn't that Long Ying Zhongsho couldn't control it and injured him, but because of the backlash from the sword intent. This is your sword path? Not bad, as expected from my disciple, Long Ying Zhongsho. With your sword today, within a few hundred years, you will be able to reach the God realm of sword intent. While he spoke, Long Ying Zhongsho was distracted like he was thinking back to something. Just now, he really felt that Zhongsho's sword contained something. It should be something really important to him, or it might be a chance to break through. However, when he thought about it carefully, he was totally confused and couldn't find any clues. It was like he was just a layer away, but he was unable to break through it. It is one. The blood-armored teen suddenly opened his mouth, causing Long Ying Zhongsho's heart to jump. He raised his eyelids and looked towards Zhongsho. His gaze was like a blade that could cut through everything. Zhongsho's expression did not change. He resisted the pressure of Long Ying's willpower and said, "It's one." As the saying goes, the onlooker sees more clearly. This disciple believes that the key to fusing the 99 Long Ying swords into one is not the word fusing, but the word one. One of the great Daos, one of the absolute beginning, one of the end. This is what I comprehended just now. I don't know if it's right or wrong. These few short sentences were like a thunderclap, exploding in Long Ying's sea of consciousness, constantly rumbling. In the blink of an eye, The solid foundation that had been built for 10,000 years collapsed with a bang. It's one? Not together? How could this be? But why is there a sign of heaven's perception? Could it be that I've been walking on a fork in the road for nearly 10,000 years? No wonder I couldn't see the end of this path. It is indeed one. Complement each other. One of the great Taos, one of the absolute beginning, one of the end, that is my true great Tao. So that's the case. Thinking about that, Long Ying laughed out loud, filled with indescribable lightness, like a huge burden had been lifted off his shoulders, and he was also delighted. In the sky, there were numerous lightning bolts gathering and flashing. Long Ying didn't bother at all. His broken foundations started to rebuild. It piled up, and in just a few breaths, his aura charged to the Ling Saint realm, right to the peak. However, this time, although his cultivation had dropped slightly, there was no more path for him. He pointed right at the source without any sense of being forced and didn't find it strenuous at all. Zhongsho's words and sword actually didn't allow him to comprehend anything. However, he only said one word, but it was like the evening drum and morning bell, causing him to suddenly wake up. Sometimes the Tao path was just like that. Maybe for thousands of years, one might not be able to improve at all, but because of the words of others, one could suddenly comprehend. However, his Long Ying's 99 Long Ying sword was a little more special. Only Zhongsho, who also cultivated this sword technique, had the right to say such words. However, if it wasn't for him being too isolated these few years, he wouldn't have any friends with him. It could be said that there was not a single close friend who could discuss the Tao with him at ease. Maybe a few thousand years ago, he would have been able to walk out of this fork in the path, not being able to differentiate between the main and the secondary. Long Ying, you are really muddle-headed. Those tens of thousands of lightning bolts roamed over. Long Ying was too lazy to bother, but he was worried that it would affect Zhongsho. He casually swept with his sword, washing the void. The sword-light aura was totally different from before. A dragon body appeared, like a god dragon appearing. One couldn't see its head and tail. The void calmed down once more amidst a dragon roar. Just like before the spirit river in the realm rift shattered. Long Ying retracted the sword, intense suppression that spread out, expressionlessly looking at Zhongsho. I will return. This time, I won't be able to come out within 10 years. Where are you planning to go? Zhongsho kept silent and didn't speak, his expression fixed as he looked into a certain direction. Within this world gap, there was no such thing as direction. Most of the time, space was flipped, left was right was left, there was no up or down. However, Zhongsho was still looking in that direction. That was what he felt in his heart. That person was definitely in that direction. Oblivion Cloud Ocean. Zone wherein? You want to find your father? The moment he asked that, Zhongsho's expression was really weird. Long Ying smiled. Do you feel uneasy? You want to not bother, but your heart isn't willing to do so. Zhongsho's lips curled up, filled with helplessness. In his heart, that was indeed what he was thinking, but he was also hesitating. You will have to face this matter in the end. I will ensure that you will be fine. Isn't it just taking over and swallowing souls? Zhongsho was shocked when he heard that, the hairs on his body standing up. Long Ying smiled with deep meaning. You will have to face this matter in the end. Speaking of which, it is time. Don't worry, your father has the ability to wipe out a world, but he won't harm you at all. He originally wanted to tease him and make his disciple worry. However, in the end, he couldn't bear to and gave him a calming pill. Then, with a wild laugh, the dragon shadow took a step forward and stepped into the void. Before he left, Long Ying's voice rang out once more. Disciple, do you want to become the God Emperor? Unify thousands of worlds, dominate the world? Zhongsho shook his head. He was still waiting for the God Emperor to appear. He could put down the foundations of Gantian Mountain and pursue the pinnacle of the sword path. As long as he could fight for a way out for the monster race, his father's subjects would have a place to settle down. Sometimes he felt that the burden on his body was too much. You have no ambition? I am afraid that the future God Emperor won't tolerate you. Although the world is huge, there can't be two tigers. Moreover, you're like the ancient times. He wasn't able to finish his last sentence. Longing had already disappeared into the void. Zhongshou was startled. The future God Emperor won't tolerate him? What did that mean? Although the world was huge, there can't be two tigers, he knew that. However, he didn't have the heart to fight for supremacy. At that time, he would just give up the country. How could there be two tigers? Now, he was like the ancient times. What was the ancient times? Why did he only finish half of his sentence? Chapter 556. Zhongshou stood on the spot in confusion. His expression was one of loss. After a short while, he came back to his senses. Thinking about it for a long time, he still couldn't understand. He could only shake his head and look at the remaining sword hilt in his hand. Just now, when he stabbed out, he could actually accelerate time. That was really surprising. It wasn't due to the random Ian talisman that was formed in his soul ocean, but it had something to do with that ball of blue light in the depths of his soul. He could clearly feel that the power that came from there caused his sword to accelerate time by at least 4 times. He tried to wave his hand, but he was unable to move space like before. Zhongshou helplessly shook his head and tossed the sword hilt far away. He sighed in his heart. His sword was destroyed one after another. There wasn't a single sword that could last for more than a year. Although he cultivated the illusionary spirit forging sword technique, as long as he had the one origin soul sword, he could use any spiritual sword or technique in an instant. However, if he could have a sword, after a long period of nurturing, it would be beneficial to his sword technique. In that instance, the image of a sword appeared in Zhongshou's mind. It was the God-refined sword in the ancestral hall, without any signs, without purposely thinking about it. The image naturally appeared in his mind. If he could have this sword and make it his personal sword, then he would be really lucky. Unfortunately, such a peak celestial grade God weapon suppressed the magical grade. Even if it was in his hands, he wouldn't be able to use it. What a waste, what a sigh. Just as such a thought flashed across his mind, Zhongshou suddenly felt that the image of the God-refined sword in front of him had changed. The spiritual light seemed to have dimmed a little, and the runes on the sword body also disappeared a little. This caused Zhongshou's brows to rise up, and he mocked himself. It seems like the battle with Shun Xiao consumed a lot of energy. His mind was totally confused. Why would something in his memory have such a change? He really didn't know what was going on. He didn't think too deeply about it. Moments later, the image of the God-refined sword totally disappeared. Zhongshou once again stepped into the void. This time, he casually took out a rank 9 spiritual sword that he had snatched from the mysterious cloud mountain and directly flew towards the east. He urged his sword forward with all his might, and after about half a day, he arrived at the side of the massive whirlpool in the sea of clouds. It was the Oblivion Cloud Sea. Before stepping in, Zhongshou hesitated again. Since Longing was able to evade his possession, he was afraid that he might not be able to hide it from others. Naturally, this included the Sea of Clouds. He still didn't know how strong Zhong Weiran was. However, judging from Longying's words, he should be fine. Moreover, it wasn't as simple as possession. Could it be that Zhongshou and Tan Xiu were really one and the same? Was it really as that fellow had said? You are me, and I am you? If it was true, then what was going on? In his last life, those tens of years were denied just like that. What kind of joke was that? Let's hope that it wasn't as he had guessed. Thinking about many things, Zhongshou finally stepped out. His footsteps became firmer and firmer, all the way into the thick fog. There was no more fear in his heart. That uneasiness was chased to a corner. He was only left with the thought of wanting to get to the bottom of things, wanting to find out where he came from, traveling through the fog. In just a moment, he was close to the inner layer of the Oblivion Cloud Ocean. At the same time, a cold scoff spread out from nearby. This is a forbidden land. You can't barge in. Mysterious cloud spirit sect is doing things here. Scram back. A wave of tyrannical power suddenly surged over. The tone was filled with disdain, filled with a cold intent, just like the first time he came. Sho's brows furrowed. Mysterious Cloud Spirit Sect? There were still remnants of Mysterious Cloud Spirit Sect in this Oblivion Cloud ocean. Why were they still guarding here so stupidly? Didn't they receive the news that Mysterious Cloud Spirit Sect had been trampled? That's right. This place was in the Oblivion Cloud Ocean, blocking out soul power. It was normal that these people guarding here didn't receive any news. Moreover, he rushed over here right away. His body continued forwards as Sho casually slashed out with his sword, following which it easily ripped open the clouds, a white blade flashing. Platinum Dragon Sword. Within the cloud ocean, one soul was unable to spread out 10,000 feet, and it was also tough to lock onto a person. He didn't care about the outcome of this sword, just casually doing it. However, the moment the sword chi dissipated, the remnant force of the shattered sword chi pushed away all the clouds and mist within 100,000 feet radius, following which he saw a person looking at his lower body in disbelief. There was a cut at his chest, neatly sliced open. There were also crimson flames climbing up and burning his entire body. Within the cloud mist, exclamations spread out. Cultivator Ge has fallen. It was actually just one sword. Who is it? How dare you? Don't you know that this place is the forbidden land of our Donglin 7 sects? Oh, I recognize you. You are Sho. When the last few words were spat out, his tone suddenly became higher, like he was shouting himself hoarse. Just 2 short words, but it was filled with endless questions and confusion. It was like he didn't expect that he would appear here. Sho could also hear the exclamations within the thick mist. However, on his face, he was smiling from start to finish. Indeed, based on Ling Yun's sex plan, at this moment, he should have already fallen at the foot of Mysterious Cloud Mountain and not appeared here. It was even more impossible for him to have the strength to kill a grade 9 with one sword. He still remembered that 3 months ago, when he used the identity of Tan Xiao to enter this Oblivion Cloud Ocean, he was forced to retreat. However, today, no matter who it was, no one could stop him from entering this Oblivion Cloud Ocean. His body suddenly flashed as he followed the source of the voice. Sho appeared behind a person. Then, the sword in his hand casually slashed out, instantly slicing off a head. Sword energy swept, stirring up the clouds within 1,000 miles. A glow appeared in Sho's eyes. Sensing the aura, he roughly grasped the locations of the other 10 over people, only to hear a furious voice. Sho, how bold you are! You dare to touch my Daoming sect people. Then he scoffed coldly. You want to enter the Oblivion Cloud Ocean to see your father? Don't even think about it. He died long ago. We searched day and night for 4 years and couldn't find any traces of him. His corpse definitely isn't left. Okay, today I will kill you, Sho, and let you and your father both die here. Good for a reunion. Sho laughed. For some reason, he was unable to accurately control his emotions today. That laughter was first so soft that it couldn't be heard. Then it crazily shook the heavens. Violent intent filled his chest. Killing intent charged into the clouds. Daoming sect. Not only did he attack, just because of those words, he wanted to wipe out the entire Daoming sect. Speaking of which, these people forced Zone Weiran into the Oblivion Cloud Ocean. Wasn't that the same as killing his father? Which was why they couldn't live under the same sky. If there was a Sho in the world, then there couldn't be a Daoming sect. Today, he had the power to sweep all sects under the shrines. How could he not do his best for his father? It seemed like in the eyes of others, he was unfilial. Thinking about it like that, his chest felt like it was being sliced by thousands of sharp blades. He really hated him. Who knows if it came from Sho or from Tan Xiao himself. His body moved once more, the sword light flashing sharply. Beside him, there was another tragic cry. A few furious roars sounded out in the cloud mist, swiftly getting close. Sho, you are crazy. My Xuanzu sect will wipe out your entire sect and level your Gantian mountain. Sho still smiled like before, not stopping for a long time. What happened next was really simple. His body sped about in the cloud ocean, killing one after another. He stirred up the heaven and earth spiritual energy within 100 miles, using the movement of energy to sense where these people were. Then he just needed a simple sword to slash over, and there would be a tragic cry. The voice in the cloud ocean went from rage to disbelief and then to fear. In a short period of time, more than 30 people had died under his sword. When he chased out of the oblivion cloud ocean, outside of the thick layer of mist, he saw only a few dozen people fleeing. One of them was still furiously hollering, "Zhongsho, my Lai Ling Li family will remember what happened today. Li Han's death was first, and with today's conflict, the Li family will fight to the death with you." Zhongsho thought back. Lai Ling Li family? 300 cultivators and 20 grade 6 Dao soldiers. They were all killed by him at mysterious Cloud Mountain. He didn't pay much attention. How could a small martial path aristocratic family enter his eyes? Without needing the blood cloud cavalry, this Li family person couldn't take one sword from him. Since he said that, then he would send him to death. His body flashed once more, and instantly he was 40 miles away. With a sword shadow passed, blood splattered. At this moment, the people around were filled with fear. One of them, who knows whether or not he knew about the news on mysterious Cloud Mountain, anxiously said, "Stop. I am innocent." That year when Monster King Weiran escaped into the Oblivion Cloud Ocean, my Hidden Sword Manor was fighting with Demon Flag Sect and didn't join in. This time, Hidden Sword Manor didn't get involved in Ling Yun's plan. "Ruler, please show mercy. Our manor is willing to submit to ruler." Zhong Shaxin's chest was ice cold. His killing intent didn't decrease at all. He wasn't moved by those words. Hidden Sword Manor? Since they didn't join in, why did they come here? If Zhong Weiran didn't die and you found him, then what? A small sect that wasn't even a spiritual house. It was okay to kill them. He drove the sword. His entire person seemed to have turned into a streak of light as he sped through the air. However, in the next instance, when Zhongsho was about to pull out his sword and slash down once more, a voice sounded out. That voice was filled with fear and anxiousness as it rang out once more. "My Hidden Sword Manor has always been close to Sir Lei Dong and is under Wujua Manor. This time, due to Sir Lei Dong's advice, we didn't join in this matter. Ruler, please show mercy." His voice was filled with a begging tone. Zhongsho smiled, keeping his sword at the last moment. There were still tens of people in front of him who were anxiously fleeing. Zhongsho didn't have the mood to chase. He was too lazy to chase and kill. Without the pinnacle space dome formation to lock down heaven and earth, killing people was just too problematic. However, after this massacre, his heart had calmed down. Chapter 557. Speaking of which, he was really amusing. He was just looking for a person to meet. Was it worth him worrying so much? He directly turned around and stepped back into the mist ocean. When he reached the inner area, he felt that this place was different from the outside world. Deep underground, there was a magnetism power. Above the sky, for some reason, there was also a vast magnetism power. The two of them repelled one another and then tore at one another. If one was caught off guard, it could rip any living being into pieces and cause them to fall for eternity. Outsiders didn't know that 10,000 years later, the secret of this oblivion cloud ocean was unraveled. However, living beings couldn't survive in this place, but it was a heaven for earth element beasts. Moreover, there was also demonic energy surging out from the deep abyss below. Using the magnetism power, it charged tens of thousands of feet high and infected the living beings here. It caused the beasts here to be really violent. Zhongsho carefully walked in the air, his mind locking onto a direction as he walked straight over. He didn't know where Zhong Weiran was at this moment. However, since Dragon Shadow said that his father wasn't dead, then at this moment, he was definitely hiding somewhere in this place. He had a feeling that he didn't need to purposely search. If he walked in this direction, he would definitely be able to find Zhong Weiran. Who knows how long passed? Just as Zhongsho's internal energy was about to be used up in this violent magnetism, his brows rose up. Oh, this place. For some reason, the blood-flowing speed in his body suddenly increased by close to double. His pulse continued to speed up. This was his bloodline, throbbing. Looking around carefully, Zhongsho locked onto a place. There was still nothing in front of him, only a thick mist. However, he instinctively felt that what he saw in front of him was definitely mysterious. Zhongsho took in a deep breath and slowly walked over. He first reached out with his hand and tried to touch the area. Then, his eyes were filled with understanding. So that was the case. Was this space folding? No wonder that Dao Ming and the other mysterious cloud spirit sect people couldn't find him. If he hadn't seen the scenes of the absolute beginning and grasped some space techniques, he wouldn't have been able to sense the abnormalities here. He didn't hesitate to tear open a crack in the space. Zhongsho's step was really stable as he stepped in. The moment he entered, he saw that it was a space close to 1,000 feet wide. He was also secretly shocked in his heart. This space was created in this oblivion cloud sea, a place where magnetism clashed. Then it was hidden in a time gap. He wondered what kind of cultivation was required to achieve such a feat. In the next instant, his pupils abruptly widened. At the center, a figure is sitting upright. In Zhongsho's memories, he had seen it more than 1,000 times. His figure was thin, his face was handsome, and his temperament was elegant, but he was also as imposing as a mountain. It was Zhong Weiran. At this moment, his eyes were tightly shut, as if he was meditating. Zhongsho looked down at the space between Zhong Weiran's hands. In front of his chest, he was holding something. Upon closer inspection, it was actually a ball of sapphire blue light. One could roughly see that within the blue light was a blue book. That style was something Zhongsho was really familiar with. He had seen it in his last life. It was the Book of Ian Extreme Life. Zhongsho's mind was instantly a loss. Was this item really in Zhong Weiran's hands? That rumor was actually true. If the book in Zhong Weiran's hands was really that unique spiritual cultivation treasure book, then what was that ball of blue light within his soul? What kind of relationship do I have with this book? The depths of his soul ocean suddenly exploded. Where that ball of sapphire blue light was hiding, it suddenly started to twist and fluctuate. It continued to change, resonating with the Book of Ian Extreme Life in Zhong Weiran's hands. Zhongsho's soul also started to shake. Then he realized in horror that his soul was actually dissipating. It wasn't dying of old age or being injured to death, the kind where his soul was destroyed. Instead, his own existence was being denied by a power in heaven and earth. Like he, Tan Xiao, shouldn't exist in this world. This power was extremely strong and suddenly happened. No matter what he did to resist, he was unable to stop it for even a moment. His consciousness slowly became blurry. Only his physical body still existed in this world. Was he going to die here just like that? If that was really the case, then he would die for no reason. Speaking of his last life, after he obtained the Book of Ian Extreme Life, it was the same. He came to the world 10,000 years ago in confusion. This life was really amusing. Zhongsho noticed that at this moment, he could actually laugh out loud. He sighed in relief. If he knew that this would happen, he wouldn't have come. He decided not to resist, just quietly waiting for the moment when he totally died. However, at this moment, the green-robed man opposite him finally moved. Oh! The moment he opened his eyes, there seemed to be stars flashing in his eyes. He looked over. His eyes were filled with confusion. Then his gaze focused, extremely sharp. "You are Shou?" Zhongsho couldn't say a word. In his heart, he was thinking, "I am Tan Xiao. Your Shou has been swallowed by me." For some reason, his heart was filled with warmth. On his frozen face, 2 streams of tears flowed down. Like he had waited for this voice and the person in front of him for a long time. This warmth made him really reluctant to part with it. It was the feeling of someone close to him. Something isn't right. Is it a takeover? Zhong Weiran frowned. His voice was filled with doubt, his eyes filled with killing intent. Just as Zhong Shaoxin's heart jumped, that voice suddenly sunk down once more. This time it was a confirmation tone. "No, you are sure. There won't be any mistake." When those words were said, the power that caused Zhongsho's soul to fly away. Suddenly it stopped. Only Zhongsho's thoughts were becoming more and more difficult, pretty much unable to think. He knew that his existence was still being denied. Zhong Weiran was in deep thought, looking at the book of Ian Extreme Life in his hand. Why is it like that? The essence of the soul is the same. However, how can there be two Zhongsho in this world? Zhong Weiran, can't give birth to two identical kids. Muttering to himself, who knows how long had passed, Zhong Weiran suddenly raised his head and looked right at Zhongsho. That gaze seemed to be able to see through millions of voids. It also pierced through Zhongsho's soul, revealing all the mysteries within, until the blue book in his hands caused space to shake once more. So that was the case. Is it the book of Ian Extreme Life? Zhong Weiran was enlightened, muttering in a daze. This world can't have two book of Ian Extreme Life. If one appears, then the other shouldn't exist. Another mocking laugh. So Zhong Weiran, am so tragic? I can't save Han Yin. I can't even protect my only kid. Zhong Shaoxin's heart moved. Han Yin? That was the name of Zhong Weiran's wife? Thinking back to Gantian Mountain, that palace also had the name Han Yin. Zhongsho's mother was surnamed Liu, the direct bloodline of the Liu family. Then it was Liu Han Yin. Who knows what Zhong Weiran thought about? His laughter was filled with sadness and self-mockery, also filled with hatred. What a Lingyun sect. They dare to do that? Zhong shouldn't have left such a problem. Brother Tiger and Brother Xinyuan are not bad. One wiped out your race. The other caused hundreds of thousands of troops to be buried. For me, Zhong Weiran, to have such a brother is my fortune. What maniac blood monster saint, nine-tailed fox king, just a pitiful and sad person who couldn't protect his wife. As he said that, Zhong Weiran's gaze turned to one of happiness, laughing softly. Showa, you are not bad. As expected of my, Zhong Weiran's child, as long as the heavens give you a chance, you will be able to soar into the heavens. You have broken the barriers from heaven. In 3 years, you have unified Donglin. Good, well done. You should chase that Lingyun sect out of this continent. Sword Emperor Tan Xiao, after going through so many hardships to have such achievements, it has been tough on you. Hey, this virtual world 10,000 years in the future is really interesting. You only need to remember that you aren't Tan Xiao, but my son Zhongsho. You need to break this mystery. He actually spoke about everything that Zhongsho had gone through, describing them one by one in great detail. With each sentence he said, Zhongsho felt that his existence was becoming more and more stable, his thoughts becoming more and more flexible. He still didn't understand. Was he really Zhongsho? Why was Zhong Weiran so sure? Even Longing was the same. Following which, Zhong Weiran looked at the blue book in his hand. Show her, do you know the history and use of this book of Ian Extreme Life? He seemed to know that Zhongsho wouldn't be able to agree now. Zhong Weiran explained. Legend has it that hundreds of thousands of years ago, before this region of the world appeared, it already existed. Along with the other book of universe creation records, they were known as the two books of the universe. The universe book recorded the path of space, and within the book of Ian was time. Many spirit masters wished for it. That's true. This book of mine does indeed contain the profundities of time. However, have you ever wondered why these two books contain the words creation and fate? Zhongsho was startled when he heard that. Did these 4 words have other mysteries? As expected, Zhong Weiran smiled. Within this book, there is not only a universe word, but also a life word. It is a treasure that can change fate. In the future, you need to use it well. He sighed slightly, filled with reluctance and also a bit of self-mockery. I really can't bear to give up a chance to become a saint in one step. Forget it. He casually waved his hand, and that blue book struck towards Zhongsho, following which it pierced through his mind into his mind palace. In that instance, Zhongsho felt his soul instantly return, once again controlling his body. He also suddenly comprehended that time could be split into the past, present, and future. He was the future Zhongsho. That book of Ian Extreme Life was also the future book of Ian Extreme Life. However, in that instance, he returned to the present. Chapter 558. Central Cloud Continent, Imperial Capital City, a courtyard less than 10,000 feet away from the palace. A scholarly middle-aged man was deep in thought as he looked at the jade letter in his hand. There were words within, bits of information which he absorbed into his soul. Gantian, Zhongsho, Blood Cloud Cavalry? Who knew that such a strong person would appear in this world? Who knows if it is a blessing or a curse for my sure family? Frowning, the middle-aged man's brows were filled with worry. He stood up and paced back and forth in the garden, deep in thought. When he sat down, he gave off a scholarly aura. However, when he stood up, his body was unusually tall, close to 10 feet, giving off a suppressive aura. Wearing the uniform of a first-grade military officer, he looked even more dignified and dignified. Thinking about it for a moment, the middle-aged man's heart shook as he looked behind him, only to see a teen wearing green armor standing 100 feet behind him with a smile. He was around 17 to 18 years old. His face wasn't too handsome, but he gave off a heroic aura, looking like jade. There were dozens of scratches on the armor on his body. Who knows if it was because of the old scratches on the armor or because of other reasons. The middle-aged man was stunned, following which he scolded. "Where did you go these few days? You finally know to come back today?" The teen smiled, not bothering at all. First, he bowed towards the middle-aged man. "Son greets father." Then, he walked to the side of the stone table and sat down, grabbing the fruits on it and starting to eat. Like he was really hungry, he ate one fruit at a time. The middle-aged general was helpless, walking to the side of the stone table. Looking at the teen in front of him, his eyes flashed with love. Then, he looked at the green armor. Dozens of white marks were half a foot deep. A few of them had totally pierced through the armor. The cuts were really smooth, obviously due to a lot of strength, making one feel shocked. The outer region is actually so dangerous? With his son's strength, he was actually heavily injured and on the verge of death. That is not the case. The teen, called Shuriwa, shook his head. "I have drifted along the world river and been to dozens of worlds. The scenery there is different from our cloud world. Most of the worlds have no spiritual energy. Martial path and spiritual spells didn't appear, only the most basic fighting techniques. Needless to say, what kind of expert can stand shoulder to shoulder with me? However, in some worlds, the martial Tao was extremely prosperous. However, the cultivation techniques were somewhat different from the cloud world. What is funny is that there are a few worlds that have rumors of our cloud world. What kind of immortal realm is this? It is said that many years ago, as long as someone can reach the void-shattering realm, they can enter our cloud world. I've specially checked the ancient records over there, and it's only at the 7th level. How can he be called an immortal? What a joke. There was actually such a miraculous thing. However, during the ancient era, our cloud world spiritual energy was so abundant that it was said to be the top of all worlds. There's nothing strange about it being called the immortal realm. The middle-aged general also shook his head slightly. Listening to this interesting news, he found it quite amusing. However, in the blink of an eye, his voice became serious. "In that case, who was the one who injured you?" Shuriwa looked at his chest when he heard that. Then, his tone was like he didn't care at all as he explained, "I went to chase that Osamu Hara, but was still shaken off. Coincidentally, I went to a world occupied by the Night Demon race. I had a huge battle with the captain of the Night Demon army. He stabbed me 3 times and I chopped off his head." Night Demon? The middle-aged general's hand instantly trembled slightly. He knew about the Night Demon race. During the Cloud Desolate era, they had once ravaged the cloud world. In the outer region, they were one of the overlords. It was said that the military system of the cloud world was copied from the Night Demon race. The captain led a unit. However, the soldiers of this unit were all grade 4 and above. They were similar to the Xiantian martial cultivators and out-of-body spirit masters of the cloud world. The captain of a unit was at least half a step to the spirit realm. He was also an expert who had been through numerous bloody battles. He was different from the cultivators of the cloud world who lived like princes. If such a person was in front of him, he could kill him with one finger. However, if it was his son, he didn't know whether he should be worried or happy. That night demon race person's personality isn't good. If they can't beat one of them, they like to gang up and attack, not stopping until one of them dies. I was helpless and could only flee left and right during this year. 2 months ago, I plotted to kill a night demon commander, and only then was I able to leave safely. What was supposed to be an extremely dangerous matter was casually mentioned by the teen, not worth mentioning at all. The middle-aged general's brows furrowed slightly. A night demon race commander had to be at the spirit realm. Looking at the teen opposite him, he felt that not only did his eyes have more killing intent, even he couldn't see through the energy in his body. It was obvious that he had improved a lot during this year of being chased all around. Although he hadn't broken through to the spirit realm, he was just half a step away. His martial path intent had probably entered the soul realm. Feeling gratified in his heart, the middle-aged man smiled. There can't be a next time. I don't care. Even if 1 or 2 of you die, I won't care. It's just that your mother has been worried about you all these days. Don't make her sad. Yes, I am unfilial and have made mother worry. Shiryue's expression was originally filled with disdain. However, when he heard the words of the middle-aged general, his expression turned serious, filled with respect. All right, 2 months ago, when I was about to return to the Cloud World, I met a Lu family member. I once met people from the Lu clan. One of their deacons came to me specifically to inquire about information. He didn't ask about anything else, only asking about a person called Zhongweiran. Unfortunately, I only heard that he built a city called Gantian Mountain in Donglin. I don't know anything else. Lu family? The one who is in charge of 800 worlds? Who else can it be? Naturally, it is the sky-burning Lu family. The middle-aged man leaned back slightly, his eyes squinting. He had long heard that Zhongweiran of Donglin Cloud Continent had a relationship with a direct bloodline girl of the Lu family. Looking at it now, this rumor wasn't baseless. Then the current Monster King of Gantian Mountain also had the bloodline of the Lu family. This matter was really interesting. A few days ago, I met people from the Eight-Tail Shui family. They were hiding in the outside world like they were planning something. I didn't bother about them. However, those ancient monster race emperor race people should have heard the news and returned to the Cloud World. It seems like the day of chaos isn't far away. As he said that, Shiryue was slightly curious. I remember before I left, didn't Juyu challenge the Sex to train his sword path? What was the outcome? This person is known as the Three-Pinnacle Sword and is said to be only a little weaker than Osamu Hara. I am also curious if this person can challenge all the sections. At this time, he should have already found the 5 shrines. 3 months ago, this person lost at Songqingdao and Tanxiu. A casual sentence caused Shiryue's eyes to open wide in shock. He didn't expect Juyu to lose. Moreover, he lost to someone he didn't know was safe. Who was this Tanxiu? I heard that the battle was really exciting. Some people said that it was the most exciting sword battle in the Cloud World in these 3,000 years, and the images spread throughout the Cloud World. This Tanxiu formed his soul body when he was grade 7. He used his soul body to fight Juyu, and in the end, after 16,000 swords, he defeated Juyu. Your second brother personally want to take a look. If you're curious, you can ask him. Shiryu chuckled. What a bunch of talents. The most exciting sword battle in the past 3,000 years. I have to take a look at this battle. Father, did Juyu go to the other shrines? The general shook his head. Not yet. I heard that after this battle, Juyu went into secluded meditation. Shiryue was startled, following which he sighed regretfully. Unfortunately, the 10,000 Sword Vast Sword sect has Sword Prince Juyu and also a grade 6 Tai Chi who merged spirit and martial arts. 10,000 Buddha Vast Habitat also has an amazing little monk. Not to mention Dowling Vast Habitat and Sky Demon Vast Habitat. It is said that there are 3 who can merge spirit and martial arts. I have always been curious about these people. Isn't Juyu afraid that others will say that he is afraid? The general smiled and didn't speak. During this period of time, there were indeed such rumors. They said that Juyu was afraid of the spirit and martial arts merger technique and was afraid of those few people, which was why he stopped when he was ahead. However, at this moment, he didn't care and was too lazy to comment. At this moment, Shuriwe focused on the jade letter on the stone table. He didn't hesitate to take it, reaching in with his spiritual sense. Forget it. I'm not like Osamu Hara, who dared to charge into our Taishan camp and kill tens of generals just to test his sword. Oh, this Zong show is really amazing. Mysterious Cloud Spirit Sect was actually wiped out by him. Blood Cloud Cavalry, Sword Intense Soul Realm, Spirit and Martial Arts Merger. If we have similar elite troops, I am confident that I can win. However, unless I have no choice, I don't want to fight with such a person. The few sword experts of the same generation in the Cloud world will probably see him as their leader. Oh right, isn't Zone Weiron's son someone that the Liu family cares about? A solemn expression flashed across his eyes, following which he asked, Father has always been worried. Is it because of this person? This person is indeed not ordinary Cloud World 6 Pinnacle Swords. With this Zone show at the top, there is no doubt about it. That Gantian mountain has already unified Donglin Cloud Continent. They have 4,000 blood cavalry and also Long Ying protecting them. Even our Taishang can't casually offend them. As he said that, the middle-aged general broke out into a laugh, his eyes filled with worry. Although this Gantian mountain is strong, it is tens of thousands of miles away. It doesn't have much to do with our central continent and our Sure family. What your father is worried about is our Taishang dynasty. Our Sure family looks really strong, but we are at the heart of the storm. If we're not careful, we will be wiped out. Your father is walking on thin ice every day. How did that happen? Shuryue's eyes were filled with confusion. Our Sure family and the country are together. We advance and retreat together. We are loyal. We have been loyal for hundreds of years and have gained the trust of our Taishang emperors. Although we aren't strong, we have military power. Within our territory, we can be considered prosperous. Is there someone in the dynasty plotting against our Sure family? The middle-aged general scoffed. Do you know about the God Emperor? Chapter 559. God Emperor? Shuriwe was distracted for a moment, following which he broke into a laugh. 10,000 years ago, legends said that he could unify the Cloud world and conquer tens of thousands of worlds. However, there are actually people who believe such nonsense. In this world, who can truly predict the future? You don't believe it, but you can't make others believe you. That middle-aged general sighed. Moreover, since those words came from that person, then it might not be nonsense. After all, many of his words have come true. Shuriwe was stunned once more, following which he nodded his head. I was wrong. However, what does this matter have to do with my Sure family? The middle-aged man didn't answer his question. Do you know that half a month ago, His Majesty removed Feng Yu's position from an upper second-grade general to a lower second-grade military governor? I just returned. How would I know? Shuriwe frowned and thought about it. Feng family? Is it because of Tai Chi? Is it because His Majesty suspects that Tai Chi is the future God Emperor? His Majesty's decree said that Feng Yu didn't fight well in the north, such that he didn't win or lose in the numerous battles with the northern barbarians. This could be considered a wise move. However, His Majesty might have such intentions. You and I both know how strong the northern barbarians are. Feng Yu is a famous general who has fought hundreds of battles. With less than 1 million troops in a province, he was able to go up against a land 3 times their size. To be able to not win or lose is already not easy. The middle-aged general's reply was really vague, following which his tone changed and was filled with helplessness. His Majesty has always been wise. Who knows why he made such a mistake this time? I'm just feeling sad for the death of the rabbit. I'm also worried. After all, compared to the Feng family, our Sure family has more ability and can replace this Taishang. The 3 of you, apart from you, you're all above your positions. You are all titled governor generals and have hundreds of thousands of elite troops. I, Sure Chinli, even gave birth to such a monster like you. Shuriwed didn't care about the last sentence, his expression turning serious. Father is worried that I am more like the future god emperor than that Tai Chi. Even if I am not, I will be one of the candidates. Sure, Chinli didn't speak, but his expression was one of silent agreement. Sure, you chuckled and said proudly, if that's the case, then I am indeed stronger than that Tai Chi. I don't know if I should be happy to receive such high expectations from Father. As far as I know, that is the divine emperor mentioned in the ancient prophecy. He must be of the orthodox lineage of a human race. He must be a descendant of a noble family. Furthermore, he must be extremely powerful in martial arts and invincible in all directions. This Tai Chi was too ostentatious. The Feng family had brought this upon themselves. However, with the protection of the Kinzo sect, His Majesty would not dare to go overboard. However, among the major Taishang families, the Shi and Feng families aren't the only ones with outstanding descendants. I think the other places are all terrified. Shi Qianli nodded slightly, his eyes becoming increasingly gratified as he said helplessly, that is indeed the case. My colleagues are now much more careful when they speak normally. At this moment, His Majesty was known for his benevolence. However, at the beginning of his ascension to the throne, his methods were ruthless. Even now, people were still afraid of him. They were all afraid of making His Majesty suspicious and jealous. I guess that was the case too. The spiritual wave is about to arrive, and the Taishang court is showing signs of chaos. His Majesty is starting to get anxious. Sure, you squinted his eyes. A weird glow flashed in the depths of his eyes. Then, Father, what are you prepared to do? Father, please tell me the truth. Sure, Qianli looked deeply at the teen opposite him. Then, he said expressionlessly, our Shi family has been greatly helped by the royal family. We can't go back on our words. If His Majesty can trust me, then our Shi family will be loyal to the Taishang. If he can't, then we will make other plans. Anyways, if we can protect this Taishang, then we will. If we can't, then we will replace it. Shi Yu smiled silently. He stood up and bowed towards Shi Qianli once more. Father is wise. Since that is the case, please send an elite army to conquer the other world. Shi Qianli was startled. This time, his face was filled with shock. At this moment, Shi Yu stood up and smiled as he explained, Father, are you surprised? However, I've been thinking, why can the alien races invade our cloud world, but we can't fight them out? At this moment, it is different from the cloud desolate era. At that time, the cloud world's martial path and spiritual techniques were weak. However, at the end of the cloud desolate era, there were several end realm experts. 10,000 years of rest, and the cloud world's essence energy has recovered. Wasn't there a prophecy in the ancient times? That God Emperor is the head of 1,000,000 worlds. He will definitely attack the other worlds. Since that is the case, then why don't I, Shi Yu, be the first to conquer the outer region? Coincidentally, when I was traveling the outside world, I noticed a world. Although it is barren, it has no owner. If we can obtain it, we can at least double the income of our Shi family every year. We can also use it to raise an army. Shi Qianli was stunned. No matter how much experience he had in his life, he was frightened by Shi Yu's words. However, in the end, he was the head of a family, one of the most powerful people in the cloud world. In just a moment, he calmed down. Why did you suddenly think about this? How confident are you? Father, this Taishang dynasty probably can't accept such a big fish like me. I also don't want to be idle, so I can only head to the outer region to fight. Shuriwes smiled and clenched his fists. He was really confident. The spiritual wave is about to rise. Some cracks in the cloud world have already opened up. I have a spiritual river that leads to the outer region and 7 ships that can transport 100,000 people. I just need to find a celestial realm cultivator to break open the world barrier. That world has less than 3 million cultivators. I just need 10,000 people towns to occupy it. It is also really secluded, and I don't need to be afraid of others noticing. Really? Sure, Qianli's eyes lit up, but it disappeared instantly. Let's talk about this in a few days. I need to think about it carefully. At this moment, the Sure family can't advance or retreat. Why not place their focus on the outer region? However, such a thing is the first in the clear cloud world, and we have to be really careful. Being careful definitely won't go wrong. Within the Oblivion Cloud Ocean, Zhongsho sat in the air. His eyes were like when he looked at the book of Ian Extreme Life, unfocused and unfocused. However, it wasn't because of his identity and his background. It was because he was at a loss for this universe. The moment Zhongweran tossed the blue book into his soul ocean, Zhongsho understood everything. He was really Zhongsho, so naturally he was Tanxiu. Zhongweran was smiling at the side, caressing his head like when he was young. Zhongsho was speechless. No matter what, he was someone who was about to reach his 50s. Adding together, he was 50 years old and wasn't a kid anymore. Although you are my father, such a thing is just too much. He had to fight back. He was the monster king of a region. If people saw this, where would his face go? He wanted to struggle. The muscles of his limbs were all tight. However, he couldn't break free. Zhongweran stood at the side. He didn't seem to do anything, but he suppressed him such that he couldn't move at all. He could only allow his father to caress his head. He felt really awkward in his heart, but he only felt a warmth like a small spring flowing in his chest. It made him really reluctant to part with it, like he had someone to rely on. So in this world, he still had family. Zhongsho's eyes felt warm, tears nearly flowing down. 10 over years since his mother died in the last life, he had been living like this. From the beginning to the end, he was all alone, and he faced everything by himself. He couldn't help but scold himself for not living up to expectations. Wasn't it just one more father? Was there need to be so emotional? He should be sad and depressed. In this world, he wasn't free and unrestrained anymore. I didn't expect that would recover the Blood Cloud Cavalry and have Long Ing as a master and Ao Kuan as a friend. Gantian Mountain is so strong. In just a few months, they will be able to unify the Cloud Continent. In the Cloud World, no one could stop them. It is much better than I thought. Zhongsho opened his mouth and realized that he could speak. He said, listlessly, "After you return, I will return the Monster King position to you." He was still unable to say the word father out of his mouth. Anyway, this Gantian Mountain wasn't his goal, but the sword path. However, because of the stubbornness of the other Zhongsho, which was why he put in so much effort, to be able to toss aside this burden was for the best. However, who knows how this Zhongweran trained these few years? How did he step into the celestial realm in a short few years? Was it because of the book of Ian Extreme Life? Oh, today this book was already his. In 2 years, if this Zhongweran dared to do this again, he wouldn't let it go. Zhongweran smiled calmly, not bothering about the disrespect in Zhongsho's words. The sky-burning Lu family said that they occupy 800 worlds, but that was 1,000 years ago. The Lu family has always been fighting with the alien races of the various worlds. Now, they might be stronger, or they might be declining. Such a huge thing, I definitely want to fight it, but I can't think of a way to defeat it. Speaking on his own, Zhongweran said leisurely, "So, I want to start from the King Path secret technique. First unifying Donglin and then fighting the other worlds. Maybe one day before I die, the Lu family can send Hanyin back to my side. However, after getting the Book of Ian, I chose another path." As he said that, Zhongweran waved his sleeves. Zhongsho's pupils constricted. There didn't seem to be any changes around, but Zhongsho could feel that the flow of time here had slowed by tens of times. If he fought with others, just using this technique, he could sweep people of the same grade. His combat strength might even exceed his own realm. If I continue, even if it is the Lu family, I might have the ability to fight them. Smiling, when Zhongweran's words landed, the flow of time around returned to normal. I wanted to use the power of the Book of Ian to charge to the Saint Realm within a few years. Now I have no choice but to leave this world. However, I can't give up on the foundations of Gantian Mountain. So why don't you try to become the God Emperor? Chapter 560. God Emperor? Zhong Shou was startled, following which he laughed coldly and didn't reply. He thought to himself that during this period of time, those few people should have started to rise up, especially that fated person, the main character of this region. Not long later, he would show his talent. After experiencing those tens of years in the virtual world, he was really clear about the cruelty of this battle. He wasn't afraid of those few people. People who cultivated lacked respect and fear. Even the millions of world masters in the future dared to fight for it. Although the rumors said that the God Emperor came from the Central Cloud Continent and was born in the human race, he could change his fate. However, since his fate could be changed, then he might be able to fight for the position of God Emperor. However, his heart wasn't here, and he wasn't willing to waste effort on this. You can force yourself to do it. Zhong Weiren seemed to have seen through his thoughts, sighing slightly. Treat it as your mother. The strength of the Liu family is far beyond your imagination. Even the current me is like a small pawn in their eyes. Even a saint realm might not be able to change their minds. The only way is to totally crush the Liu family and shatter the 800 worlds. Zhong Shaoxin's heart jumped, his pupils constricting. Mother? Liu Hanyan. Scenes from when he was young appeared in his mind one by one. It wasn't Tan Xiu, but Zhong Shou. He didn't have any memories of Liu Hanyan. He also didn't know what his mother looked like. At that time, he envied others for having a mother to love them. However, it was said that his clothes were personally made by his mother and left in the Hanyan palace until he was 8. It was like before he was born. She knew that he couldn't stay in the cloud world. Then, during that period of time, she would personally cut and sew each piece for him. Although he didn't meet her, he could feel that she really valued him and loved him deeply. However, didn't his mother say that she was taken away by the Liu family? Why would Zhong Weiren say that? In his imagination, as long as Zhong Weiren was able to display strength worthy of being a direct bloodline disciple of the Liu family, this matter could be easily solved. Could it be that there was something else he didn't know about? Looking over with a questioning gaze, only to see Zhong Weiren laugh self-mockingly. You should know about this matter now. Back then, the Liu clan said that your mother had committed a grave mistake by marrying an outsider, so they viewed her as a sinner. Actually, Zhong Weiren, should have died 20 years ago in the hands of the Liu family. However, it was your mother who shouldered the burden and was willing to accept the cruel punishment of the clan. This clan's rules are very strict. I don't think they will break the rules just for me. This kind of 10,000-year-old clan is most afraid of breaking the rules. They can't put down their face. Zhong Shou silently looked at the sky, but his brows were tightly knitted. In other words, the only way was to destroy the sky-burning Liu clan that controlled the 800 worlds. Crush their arrogance before talking to them. Zhong Shou struggled for a while between the pinnacle of swordsmanship and kinship. Then, he made his decision. I'll do my best. In the future, in a world that focused on spiritual cultivation, there was a sentence that left a deep impression on Zhong Shou. In this world, there were no unfilial celestials. In the eyes of true cultivators, that was just nonsense. However, Zhong Shou agreed with those words. Speaking of which, he couldn't be considered a pure swordsman. Some people could give up everything for the sword path and not care about kinship. For example, Li Yeling, who killed his wife and mother, he had nothing to worry about. However, he couldn't do that. Now, he had too many burdens in his heart. There were many people and many things that he couldn't let go of. Zhong Shou had his own path. He saw these things and these people as his own cultivation. If he learned to give up, he would lack one thing. If he didn't try his best, then he wouldn't be complete. This was also the foundation of Zhong Shou's sword heart. Speaking of which, before Old Man Longing left, he had mentioned this before. The world was so huge that it couldn't accommodate 2 tigers. Did he predict this matter? Actually, he knew that his thoughts before were too naive. He, Zhong Shou, still had to compete with those few people. Seeing him nod his head, Zhong Weiren smiled in satisfaction. Just try your best. If you really can't, then there's no need to force yourself. Try to protect yourself and retreat from the cloud world. As he said that, his voice became filled with melancholy. Father has to leave. With those few world protector venerables here, and without the Book of Ian protecting, I won't be able to stay in this world for long. If those few people sense me, they will most probably find out where the Book of Ian is at. In the future, you need to be careful. Before you reach the God realm, don't come and find me. Just treat it as if you have never seen me before in this oblivion cloud ocean. Zhongsho's brow rose up coldly. He thought back to those few people whose voices he had heard but never seen before. During the mysterious cloud spirit sect battle, Song Shengdao used his strength to set up a plan. It should have caused a venerable to die on the spot. In a short time, they would be well-behaved. However, if it was for the Book of Ian, those 5 people would most probably go all out, unless they reached the God realm and had the ability to protect themselves. Then, where are you going? Is there anything I can help you with? Zhongsho wasn't willing to stay here any longer. He also knew that Zhong Weiron's words weren't just to scare him. He knew that although those Saint Realm cultivators couldn't predict the future, their senses were really sensitive. Even if there was a slight flaw, it could allow those Saint Realm venerables to deduce the truth. Far away from the Oblivion Cloud Ocean, just as he stepped outside, Zhongsho could feel a vast spiritual sense sweep over and cover his entire body. It was really hidden. If it wasn't for Zhongsho's martial path intent entering the soul realm, he wouldn't have noticed it. He paid special attention and was unable to notice it. However, the range was limited to 30 feet around him. The spiritual sense swept his body and seemed to be afraid of something, retreating like a wave and not coming into contact with him. Zhong Shaoxin laughed coldly, acting like he didn't notice anything. He continued to act like he was searching around in the Oblivion Cloud Ocean. Until 3 days later, he didn't notice anything. Only then did he walk out of the cloud ocean in disappointment. At this moment, he wasn't sure whether or not that person's spiritual sense had left. He acted like he didn't notice anything and headed west. He flew swiftly in the sky for a full day before that abnormal sense of danger retreated. Only when his soul power was used up did he choose a beautiful mountain peak to land on. While recovering his soul power, Zhongsho entered that meditation state. Like he was sleeping, but not sleeping, like a dream, but not a dream. Then his mind suddenly expanded. Just like that, Zhongsho formed his body in the void of his heart and stepped within. In just a moment, he was close to that ball of blue light. Thinking back to a few years ago, he had drunk wine here with another him. Zhongsho's eyes were filled with melancholy. At that time, he didn't think that the two of them were one. Following which, he looked towards that ball of blue light. After muttering a sentence, Zhongsho stepped in front of that ball of light. In the past, when he came here, he tried to study this thing. However, he was rejected, unable to enter at all. However, today, there was a suction force, such that before Zhongsho was able to do anything, he was swallowed in. Stepping in, Zhongsho looked in front of him. This huge book in his soul ocean seemed to be in a daze as he reached out with his hand. This is the extreme era of eternity. Chapter 561. This is Book of Ian Extreme Life. On the cover of the book were the words Book of Ian Extreme Life. Zhongsho used his hand to touch it. This body was formed by his mind and didn't have a physical body. However, the moment he touched it, he still felt a cold intent spread out from the book. Large amounts of information charged into his brain, causing Zhongsho to feel dizzy. It felt really mysterious, like that time on the world viewing platform when he saw a world open. Who knows how long passed before Zhongsho got used to it. Then his eyes were filled with shock and joy. What surprised him was that this book was really thorough in its interpretation of time. Even though, at this moment, what he came into contact with was just the most shallow parts. It was really detailed and involved all laws. The universe had 4 dimensions, and this time dimension was like a line that ran from the beginning to the end. It had something to do with all the Daos and all the laws. However, at this moment, the information that was injected into his soul ocean was enough for him to digest in a few years or even decades. Now that he thought about it carefully, There were already too many things piled up in his memory. The core of the beginning, the black and white holes, and also this book of Ian. His soul was already suffering from indigestion. There were some theories within that he wouldn't be able to understand even 100 years later. However, in his heart, he was still unwilling to stop here. He still wanted to continue reading. He was excited and instinctively wanted to chase the Tao. He reached out and wanted to flip open the next page. However, Zhongsho only felt a strong resistance spread out from the fingertips of his body. Frowning slightly, Zhongsho used strength. He would definitely be able to flip open this page. More and more information surged into his mind, and it was constantly changing. On the page of the book of Ian Extreme Life, there seemed to be a lock added, like a spiritual formation. It contained numerous time laws which intersected with one another. However, when Zhongsho broke them one by one, the page finally opened. Inside was a blank piece of paper without a single word written on it. However, Zhongshoshin's mind went blank again. More seal characters, talisman scripts, and spiritual runes were forcibly imprinted into his sea of consciousness. Regardless of whether he was willing or not, he forcefully imprinted it on him. Time passed. 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 2 hours, 4 hours. It wasn't until there was an explosion in Zhongsho's mind did his consciousness awaken. He looked at the book of Ian in front of him and was filled with respect. There were a total of 9 pages in the book of Ian. It should correspond to the 9 realms of body: earth, heaven, spirit, immortal, God, saint, absolute, and truth. With his cultivation base, he should be able to see the 3rd page, the page that belonged to the heaven realm. However, Zhongsho did not dare to continue reading. This top Tao scripture, in terms of its essence, should be the same as the world viewing platform. Just opening this page consumed at least 20 years of his lifespan. He didn't have much lifespan left. When the 2nd page was opened, it would be the day he died. However, just this first page was enough for him. With a thought, a fluctuation spread out from his soul ocean. Between the black and white holes, the Ian word gave off a bright golden glow and started to change its structure. It continued to give off spiritual light and rise in height. A giant Ian word stood at the top of all the other talismans. As for the other luck character, it suddenly changed and also flashed with traces of golden light. Fate, 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 and luck were all connected. Within the book of Ian, apart from the mysteries of time, there was also a life word. It was different from luck, but it was enough for Zhongsho to raise the luck word. When these 2 talismans were formed, Zhongsho's spiritual energy was swiftly expanding. It caused his soul to continue to swell. His soul was also improving. It was originally pure to the extreme, but at this moment it was even more condensed and pure. This step had allowed him to step into grade 9. It was the true image realm, peak of cloud realm, the extreme of heaven realm. Zhongsho smiled. With this advancement, he gained 100 to 200 years of lifespan. At least he didn't have to worry about dying within 10 years. Only then did he dare to flip open the 2nd and 3rd pages. It was the same as when he looked at the 1st page, but the time he used was much longer. Zhongsho didn't think he could understand. He just tried his best to memorize it. When Zhongsho regained consciousness once more, he was shocked. This uninhabited mountain peak had already experienced a full 10 days. Looking at the blue book of Ian Extreme Life in front of him, Zhongshoxin really couldn't imagine how Zhong Weiran comprehended all of this in 2 years and charged to the celestial realm level. Oh, his heart suddenly moved. Zhongsho once again used his spiritual sense to investigate. He only felt that within the book, there was a ball of extremely thick times spiritual energy that was not there at all. If it surged outside, it would be really majestic, able to cover at least 1/10 of Donglin Cloud Continent. However, it was gathered within this book. It was condensed into a ball, unable to be noticed. When he used his spiritual sense to touch it, he felt that the time flow around this book became really weird. So that's the case? Zhongsho thought about it seriously before comprehending. He also finally understood why Zhong Weiran was able to step into the celestial realm within 2 years. It wasn't 2 years, but hundreds of years, even thousands of years. As long as one had enough spiritual energy, this item could greatly distort time. As expected from a god artifact, these 10,000 years of accumulation caused the time spiritual energy gathered within the book to be extremely abundant. It caused Zhong Weiran to enter the celestial realm in 2 years. Even a few years later, he would step into the god realm, saint realm, condensing thousands of years of time into 2 years. This book of Ian Extreme Life wasn't just a Taoist book that recorded time. It was also a god artifact. If not, how could it change Zhongsho's fate? However, although this item was good, in his hands, it could only be treated as a slightly special spiritual technique manual. That was because the spiritual energy gathered within the book had been used up. Only this little bit was left to maintain the most basic spiritual energy of the book. Bringing his soul to transmigrate to this era wasn't an easy matter. The merger just now also consumed the Book of Ian in Zhong Weiran's hands that belonged to the present. Simply put, the book in his hands was now an empty shell. Zhongsho couldn't help but sigh. As expected, he didn't need to think about reaching the heavens in one step. Following this, a thought occurred to him, and he reached out into the air, grabbing 10 spirit stones in the process. They were all pure blue in color and were time element grade 9 mind stones. Out of beasts, there were very few that could grasp time ability. There weren't many god beasts in the Cloud Desolate era. Naturally, there were very few such beast crystals. Only Mind Stone mines produced some. However, the chances were really low. Their price was usually 10 times that of same grade Mind Stones. If he had 2 of the few in his hands, he could exchange for a Xian grade 1 Mind Stone. Items of heaven and earth were all within heaven, earth, Xian, and Huang grades. In a cloud world, all the spiritual stone veins were only of the most ordinary yellow grade. In the eyes of those spirit realm and celestial realm cultivators, they were all trash that couldn't be used. Only time and space special mind stones were the most precious. At this moment, Zhongsho didn't hesitate to crush it. Instantly, a pure time spirit surged out. As expected, it was absorbed by the Book of Ian without any hesitation. Zhongsho could clearly feel that the spiritual energy within the book had increased by a little. He moved the book to slow down the flow of time around him. He meditated, forgetting himself while waiting quietly. It could be an instant, or it could be days. When Zhongsho felt that this book of Ian Extreme Life couldn't continue, he opened his eyes. He looked at the sky, judging the time from the stars. Then, his eyes were filled with bitterness. Only 3 days had passed. 3 days of time gathered in 15 minutes. The spiritual energy provided by the 10 grade, 9 mind stones were all used up. This meant that even if he threw in all his wealth, he could only slow down the time by 50 days. How much use would 50 days be to him at this moment? Unless he had more sapphire mind stones. Samuraim's eyes shone. Near Gantian Mountain, there were 2 large mind stone mines that were about to form. In the entire Donglin Cloud continent, he knew about many mind stone mines that were about to appear. One of them was even top grade. However, this was far from enough. It was impossible to snatch food from the mouths of the Taishang and the various sects in the central continent. The other few cloud continents were too far away. The ones in control, there were also shrines and sections. The only way was the outer region. Did he really have to conquer other worlds? If he had enough mind stones, he could use this Book of Ian to search for the pinnacle of the martial path. Just as he thought about that, Zhongsho was astonished. Why would he have such thoughts? Conquer the outer region? How ambitious! Then, he broke out into a laugh. As expected, he would do anything for his own goals. In the past, he felt that Gantian Mountain was a burden, so he wanted to get rid of it. At this moment, he felt that the power in his hands could help him reach the pinnacle of the sword path, so he was thinking about how to use it. Lazy to think about it, Zhongsho stood up. He stretched out his hand and beckoned. A faint dragon roar rang out in the air. Nearby, A total of 10,000 feet long spirit veins were drawn over by him. They were split into yin and yang, gathering lightning. These are the 6 heaven veins. Pretty much at the same time, they surged into his body and were forcefully absorbed into his meridians, starting to circulate. In just a moment, he had already tamed and refined them, carving Zhongsho's mark. Zhongsho's martial path intent had reached the soul realm. The barrier between grade 7 and grade 8 didn't exist to him. At this moment, he had absorbed the essence energy of Shunshao to wash his meridians. In just 10 days, he had already stabilized. His body was strong and stable. Stepping into the 8th stage of the martial way with internal breath was naturally a matter of course, and it was that simple to begin with. Chapter 562. The energy in Zhongsho's body shook, lasting for tens of breaths before it stopped. Pretty much every breath he took would cause the spiritual energy within 1,000 feet to shake. Such a situation continued until Zhongsho was able to control every bit of internal energy and spiritual energy in his chakra meridians before it stopped. He felt slightly weird. Such a strong feeling was something he had never felt in his last life. From today onwards, he had totally stepped out of the Tanshio in his last life, exceeding his achievements at that time. However, his improvement was still too quick. In just a few months, he had advanced to such a realm. He could feel that his control over his body was far from before. Out of 100% of his strength, he could probably only use 40% of it. Moreover, it was still like a lone yin couldn't grow and a lone yang couldn't be born. He could feel that the world's shocking yin and yang true energy in his body was a little unstable. At this moment, he was still fine. However, after he entered the 9th grade, if he didn't solve this problem, he wouldn't be able to take another step forward. As expected, he had to get married as soon as possible. Thinking about Xinyuan Irin, Zhongsho couldn't help but touch his chin and give out a lewd laugh, following which he sensed something and exclaimed, "Oh, you little fellow, you've actually woken up." His eyes were focused on his left arm. At this moment, Little Gold was also causing waves of energy to move. It caused numerous lightning glows to gather all around. It was actually a grade 9 in one step, borrowing the power of the true celestial realm level Wanxiang beast pellet. At this moment, it was already on the verge of breaking through to the spirit realm. However, it was forcefully suppressing itself and not stepping over that boundary. Zhongsho's brows furrowed, his eyes filled with joy. He temporarily dispelled his thoughts of leaving. He took out tens of mind stones and tossed them in all directions, forming a simple spiritual formation. On one hand, it suppressed the spiritual energy tremors. On the other hand, it blocked all the demons and monsters that came over after hearing the news. Little Gold's current situation was different from when he had advanced naturally and had energy to spare. In addition to absorbing the essence of the all-creation's crystal core and digesting the profound qi, this little guy also had to forcefully suppress himself so that he couldn't cross that boundary. He probably didn't have much strength left to defend against these evil demons. Naturally, he, as the master, had to take care of these matters. They sat there quietly, protecting him. About 3 days later, the lightning that had gathered between heaven and earth finally dissipated. At this moment, Xiao Jin's body had turned completely golden. It was sliding down his arm and falling. Zhongsho probed with his spiritual senses, and the corners of his lips curled up. This Little Gold might not be very smart, but it already knew how to make a choice. This time, he didn't hesitate to give up on the chance to enter the spirit realm, and instead chose to consolidate his strength. Using a portion of Shun Zhao's essence, he digested and swallowed the crystal core. Then, he used the power of the crystal cores to temper his body. At this moment, Little Gold looked like a softball, but its physical strength was actually several times stronger than his. He saw this fellow's body change, and not long later, it formed the appearance of a little rabbit. Apart from the color of its body, it was extremely similar to a fire feather rabbit that grew in the south of Donglan. Zhongsho blinked, recalling that he had given it the beast crystal of such a fire feather rabbit before. However, these changes were just the start. In just a moment, its body twisted once more, and its wings spread out. It swelled several times and flew in the air, circling around Zhongsho's body. Looking at its appearance, it was a red-winged spiritual rock. Its body was wrapped in a fire glow, and it was actually able to grasp 80 to 90% of the abilities of such a being. In a short 15 minutes, Zhongsho saw little gold change into tens of living beings. The birds and beasts in the cloud world were all extremely similar, not a single millimeter off. Even those top grade 9 beasts could mimic close to 80% of their strength. However, if it was god beast level, then it was only 70%. At this moment, Little Gold could be considered a true Wanxiang, the seed of a god beast. Only now, its bloodline wasn't pure enough. In the end, it formed into a dragon shape, 1,000 feet long, looking really majestic. Numerous lightning bolts spread out, covering 10 miles of land. Its body had wings, and it looked exactly like his lightning-winged dragon. Be it ability or form, it was really similar. Even that dragon aura could be replicated perfectly. It was also a grade 9 level that the lightning-winged dragon hadn't reached. Zhongsho's eyes constricted slightly. He knew that this fellow had swallowed a lot of dragon blood and spent every day with a lightning-winged dragon. To be able to replicate the shape of the lightning-winged dragon wasn't surprising. What was rare was that the entire dragon body was close to perfect. The similarity was above 90%. Even the pterosaur lurking on his arm was bewitched. Like it was surprised that it met one of its kind, it came out from his arm and wanted to play with Little Gold. Unfortunately, the latter didn't care and wasn't interested in playing with it. The dragon body changed once more, shaking slightly before it shrunk back to the size of 2 palms. This time, 6 pairs of wings spread out. Its body was burning with a pure white flame. His body seemed to be in the shape of a human, and 2 pairs of intimidating blade-like arms stretched out. It looked exactly like the Saint Fire Ant Queen, Hanshi. However, the color of its shell was pure gold. The dangerous aura wasn't any lower. Zhongsho's sleeve shook once more. A silver light pierced out and stopped in front of Little Gold. It looked similar. It was Hanshi. There was no expression on its face. Its eyes were still calm. At this moment, Zhongsho could roughly sense that the mood of the Saint Fire Ant Queen was really bad. Its killing intent was high. It stared at Little Gold with a threatening intent. The latter's intelligence was already open, and it could sense something. However, he narrowed his eyes and waved his right saber arm in a provocative manner. Hanshi couldn't take it anymore, not bothering about Zhongsho's spiritual sense suppression. Its body turned into a light as it pounced over. The gold and silver colors also instantly turned into blurry shadows. They constantly collided within this 1,000-feet space, circling and trembling as they collided. One couldn't see its body, only numerous sparks flashing. Its speed far exceeded that of a normal grade 9 martial cultivator. At the start, Zhongsho tried to suppress it, but in the end, he noticed that not only was Hanshi furious, but even Little Gold was also filled with fighting intent. He was too lazy to waste any effort, quietly looking on from the side. The more he saw, the happier he felt. Maybe it was because since he started cultivating as Zhongsho, he had been by his side. During the intense battle, this little fellow was actually able to use a portion of his sword intent. This intense battle only lasted for 15 minutes before it came to an end. A gold and a silver light both hung in the air, only to see Little Gold's arm blade stop at the center of Hanshi's brow. It stabbed into its pinch, coincidentally piercing through the armor and not injuring it to such an extent. The latter's aura was unusually cold. Its expression was like a piece of ice that couldn't be melted. Beneath this ice, there was burning magma flowing. Little Gold didn't care. Its eyes filled with disdain, looking towards Hanshi with a threatening gaze before keeping its arm blade. It then flapped its wings and returned to the front of Zhongsho, turning into a softball and landing in his palm. It continued to rub, like it was trying to get on his good side, like it was trying to give credit. His entire body seemed to be saying, "Come and praise me." Zhongsho broke out into a laugh, knowing that the battle, just now, was Little Gold standing up for him. It was probably the same as the lightning winged dragon, unhappy with the Saint Fire Silver Ant. After the latter formed its dragon body and advanced, it threatened Hanshi right away. Little Gold was the same, directly challenging it and defeating it head-on, suppressing its arrogance. He had his own ways to totally subdue Hanshi and didn't need their help. However, he could feel the sincerity in her heart. As expected from someone who he brought up from young, knowing how to care for its master. Not bad, not bad. With a thought, he thought back to the few threads of sword intent that Little Gold simulated. It was really shallow, but it was probably the only one amongst beasts. Who knows when it would be able to simulate a human form in the future? Wanxiang was ever-changing, able to simulate all living beings in the world. As for humans, other than their intelligence surpassing other races, their bodies were only comparable to low-level beasts. With the ability of Wanxiang, naturally it could be easily done. However, what Zhongsho was thinking about was if Little Gold could learn all his martial path, what would happen? He was slightly distracted until Zhongsho came back to his senses. Little Gold had turned into a thin layer once more and covered his arm. As for Hanshi, it returned back into his sleeves. However, its arrogance in the past had lessened by a little. It was unusually silent. Its spiritual sense was also really dim. Zhongsho laughed, too lazy to bother. He once again drove his sword into the air and continued west. After flying for several hundred kilometers, he suddenly frowned and looked toward the south. Over there, a majestic wave of Yin energy shot straight into the sky like a giant pillar. He remembered that was where Gong Shinran was buried. Looking out within 100 miles, the gravity had pretty much turned into a physical form. It attracted numerous evil spirits and dead items to gather here. The Yin vein seemed to have increased a little. Zhongsho frowned. Thinking about it, he knew that it was mostly because the spiritual wave was about to rise. It caused more Yin veins to be attracted here. Some of them just formed recently. Even if he didn't know how to chase out evil spirits and fend off demons, he knew that the situation wasn't good. Based on what Jinbu Hui said, when Gong Shinran came out would be a few years later. However, looking at it today, why did it feel like in just a few months she would break out of the seal? In the past, this was the problem of Ling Yun's sect. At that time, he was gloating. At this moment, the entire Donglin Cloud continent was under his control. This Gong Shinran had become his own problem. However, he wouldn't be able to laugh anymore. As expected, every drink and every bite was predetermined. What he personally created still needed to be solved by himself. Chapter 563. At the same time, within the cloud ocean, above a floating palace, Gu Hanyun looked calmly at the cloud mist in front of her, which was twisting and changing. Her eyes were totally unfocused, numb and cold. She was originally a fiery person, but at this moment she gave off a cold aura. Just like the current cloud palace, it was extremely desolate and cold. In the past, Ling Yun's sect disciples could be seen everywhere in this cloud palace, searching for places to cultivate and study the martial path and spiritual techniques. At this moment, looking out, there were only 3 to 5 people. Most of them were distracted, their faces filled with worry. It wasn't until Yin Feibai walked behind her that Gu Hanyun's eyes regained some of their luster. Has the meeting ended? Looking at how Yin Feibai could stand here, she knew. So that sentence was just a subconscious question. Gu Hanyun turned around, but her expression was still somewhat absent-minded. Speaking of which, Senior Master Ling Weizi and Senior Master Long Ruo all fell on Mysterious Cloud Spirit Mountain. Yes. Yin Feibai nodded his head. His expression was much more calm than a few days ago. Not long ago, it was much more serious. Not only Senior Master, but our Ling Yun sect's 400 grade 6,000 soldiers and the 2,000 cultivators that followed all fell. I heard that Senior Master Long Ruo was casually slain by that Monster King along with a grade 9 spirit cultivator of mysterious cloud spirit sect. Poor Senior Master. He hated that Zhong Shou his entire life. However, in the end, that Monster King didn't even look at him. Killing Senior Master was just a matter of convenience. On the contrary, Han Nishui was hated by that Monster King and was sliced at the waist. Gohan Yin didn't know what Yin Feibai meant by that. It sounded like he was mocking, but his tone wasn't mocking at all. However, at this moment, she didn't feel any injustice for this senior master whom she had only met a few times. Since Long Ruo was furious because of his own mistakes, his fear turned into hatred and he lost his calm heart. He was destined to have such an outcome. With an almost inaudible sigh, Gohan Yun continued to ask, "Then what did the elders say?" Just now the sect leader gave up his position. The punishment is to face the wall for 900 years as punishment. When he finished speaking, a few bell chimes came from within the Cloud Palace. It was majestic and grand, but at this moment, it made the originally cold and cheerless palace even more desolate. This was to announce that the Lingyun sect had a new sect master. Yin Feibai calmed himself down before speaking once more. "Senior Uncle Zurenquan will take charge of Lingyun. I will be the first disciple and the next sect leader candidate. From today onwards, the Lingyun sect will leave the Donglin Cloud Continent. The sect wants to have a chat with the Monster King of Gantian Mountain." Gohan Yin came to a sudden realization. The so-called talk was a request for peace. The current Lingyun sect knew that they didn't have the ability to go up against Gantian Mountain. Thinking about Donglin Cloud Continent, he felt his body turn cold. The soaring cloud sect was there, and there were almost 2 outer sect disciples there. There were also the families of the disciples, and their roots were intertwined. With this retreat, the 10,000 years of elites of the cloud-soaring sect were all gone. Thinking back to the death of those 2,000 fellow disciples on mysterious Cloud Mountain, Gohan Yin couldn't help but feel sad. Gohan Yin couldn't help but feel sorrowful. She said with resentment, "Don't tell me that the corpses of those 2,000 fellow disciples in mysterious Firmament Mountain are just going to be forgotten?" In her heart, she was filled with admiration for Zhong Shou. She was also delighted by her foresight. That teen who used one sword to humiliate a sect on Pill Spirit Mountain was really extraordinary. Dual Meridian Body, Barriers from Heaven, Remnant Soul Body. As expected, they were all unable to stop him. 2 years later, that Monster King finally soared into the heavens and looked down on this world. However, at this moment, she only felt abnormally heavy in her chest. After all, our Lingyun sect schemed first. Moreover, in this world, the fist is the law. The fist of the current Gantian Mountain is a little bigger than ours. Yin Feibai shook his head slightly, knowing that his junior sister was just using this to vent. At this moment, she most probably didn't have any intentions to be enemies with that person. Looking at Gohan Yin calm down, Yin Feibai spoke expressionlessly once more. "Even if we want to take revenge, now isn't the time. You and I are the remaining direct disciples of the sect, and have the responsibility to pass down the teachings and protect the sect. Now, not only do we need to make peace with Gantian Mountain, but we also need to think of a way to borrow their strength. If there is a chance, it isn't impossible to serve under him." Gohan Yin's brows furrowed, her eyes filled with shock and disbelief. Half a day ago, 17 sects and aristocratic families were destroyed by the Blood Cloud Cavalry. The remaining 4 were destroyed by the Demon Path. Today, outside of the Cloud World, there are numerous demon sect cultivators. Even some spiritual houses and sects are eyeing us aggressively. As he said that, Yin Feibai's expression didn't change at all. It was like he treated this crisis that could destroy Gantian Mountain at any moment as a casual matter. However, if that Monster King doesn't speak up about the conflict between our sect and Gantian Mountain, if that Monster King doesn't say anything, who in this world would dare to help me? Gohan Yin's face instantly turned ashen white. These last words caused her to come to her senses. At this moment, The strength of Gantian Mountain was actually at such a level. If that monster king didn't allow it, who under the shrines would dare to help Ling Yun? As for the shrines and sects, they would probably ask what benefits would they get if they helped Ling Yun. On a secluded mountain range, along with loud explosions, the spiritual energy here surged endlessly. Hundreds of thousands of people gathered here, beating the drums and shaking the heavens. Most of them wore messy armor, and their formations weren't really orderly. However, with so many densely packed armored soldiers gathered here, the aura they gave off was extremely majestic. At the waist of the mountain, Yin Yang caressed the blood-colored halberd in his hand, looking forward calmly and coldly. These soldiers and horses were the lords of the nearby cities who gathered here on their own accord. Actually, apart from strengthening their aura, they didn't have much use. They just wanted to use this to show that they were willing to submit to Gantian Mountain. At this moment, there were dozens of spirit masters who were controlling 20 grade 5 energy destroying crossbows to fire. That seemingly unbreakable spiritual formation was already covered in cracks. In just a few more minutes, it would be able to blow it open. Even if the mountain was able to hold on, the 2,400 blood cloud cavalry under him were enough to forcefully smash open this mountain. A unit of 300 blood cloud cavalry. If they were led by a grade 7 cultivator, they could go up against a grade 9. If there were more than 1,000 of them, their strength could directly enter the spirit realm. Unfortunately, at this moment, the only grade 7 cultivators in the blood cloud cavalry were him and Zhong Yuan. To prevent others from taking advantage of them, they could only split into 2 groups, led by him and Zhong Yuan to wipe out sects one by one. Their speed was also much slower than expected. Many aristocratic families and sects had hidden methods that far exceeded what they showed on the surface. For example, the Cloud sect in front of them, a small sect with less than 300 people. Who would have thought that their mountain-protecting formation would be so firm? Yin Yang, on the other hand, was eager to give it a try. There was some impatience in his eyes. The blood in his body seemed to be burning up, causing his vital energy to boil, and he was unable to control himself. This was the first time his fighting spirit was so strong. He thought that after stepping into grade 7, his accumulations were all used up. His cultivation advancement would slow down. However, that day, Zhong Shou gathered everyone's strength to go up against that Shinshao. His entire primordial spirit seemed to have been cleansed. The marrow washing, tendons changing, and bones forging was even more surprising. Most of the blood cloud cavalry still had poison in their bodies, so the effects weren't obvious. However, Yin Yang's cultivation was showing signs of loosening, like he was about to break through. "Commander, you seem to be a little anxious today." A question spread out from the side. Yin Yang turned around, only to see that it was Ling Feikong who led hundreds of spirit masters over. Frowning, Yin Yang knew that his emotions were a little abnormal. He nodded his head. "I am indeed anxious. Ruler's wedding is near, and these sects haven't all been wiped out, which is why I'm anxious." At the start, he personally saw how Miss Erin and Zhong Shou got together. Now that the two of them were getting married, how could he not be there? Ling Feikong was startled. Unknowingly, that kid had already become an adult. 2 years ago, he didn't think that he could survive in this cruel and chaotic world. He could live to adulthood, and even on his wedding day. He missed it once, so he definitely couldn't miss it a second time. These sects are really stubborn. With the strength of Gantian Mountain and the reputation of the Blood Cloud Cavalry, only 60% of these sects chose to flee Donglin. The other 20% chose to serve Gantian Mountain to preserve the legacy of Spirit Mountain. As for the other sects like Cloud sect that had some confidence, they all chose to hide within their mountain gates and wait. Who knows if they were really dumb or if they were too confident in their own sect strength. This Cloud sect is amusing. They actually hope that those few sects who are helping them can come and help. Based on what Ling Feikong knew, there were 3 sects that were similar to Cloud sect. They were truly connected. However, just half an hour ago, 2 of the 3 sects had already fled. The remaining ones had surrendered and were willing to be ruled by Gantian Mountain. In his eyes, Cloud's sex actions were just to raise their own status. They wanted to reduce the sharpness of the Blood Cloud cavalry and then win a higher position in Donglin. They didn't have any intentions to fight to the death. He had seen many cases before, and it was really annoying. Yang listened on silently. Suddenly, he saw dozens of spiritual lights rise up. In just a moment, it caused the spiritual formation that was on the verge of breaking to recover by a large amount. Thus, the last bit of patience disappeared. Tree the blood kill twin flags. Before we wipe out this sect, we won't seal our blades. Even if Xinyuan Irin scolded him after the matter, he would accept it. When his voice landed, he had already led the cavalry to start galloping in the air. Yang suddenly took out a small halberd and tossed it out. The Blood Cloud cavalry behind did the same. 2,000 blood-colored halberd lights instantly smashed down like meteors and smashed into the mountain peak. The entire mountain shook violently. At this moment, Yang had also arrived in front of the spiritual formation. The blood-colored halberd in his hand slashed down. It turned into 1,000 feet, and then, with a loud explosion, it smashed this layer of barrier. It was forcefully smashed. It caused close to 100 spirit masters who were going all out to maintain the formation to spit out fresh blood. At this moment, hundreds of thousands of people were totally silent. This was the strength of the Blood Cloud cavalry. Seeing once was better than hearing 100 times. Chapter 564. Within the dark meditation room, it was really quiet and empty. There was only one person in the huge space. He laid sideways, chanting scriptures without any sincerity while drinking wine and eating meat. In front of him were various delicacies as well as fragrant wine. What was weird was that the wine and meat were in his mouth. However, it didn't affect his speech. His rhythm was really rhythmic. His voice was like that of a broken gong. However, it was really pleasing to the ear. Occasionally, he would knock on the wooden fish, looking really carefree. At this moment, if Jingyin was here, she would be able to recognize that this was the old monk who spoke to her in a really friendly manner. Just as he was feeling really relaxed, a dark wind swept up in the room. When Ling Hai reacted, a person appeared in front of him. He was also a monk with a square face and big ears. He was what the divination books described as having great fortune. However, at this moment, his face was filled with a bitter expression. Ling Hai was shocked, hurriedly waving his sleeves and keeping all the wine and meat. When he saw who it was, he heaved a sigh of relief. "So, is you? You really scared me to death." Following this, he felt weird. His eyelids opened. "Isn't your world protector's rule not to appear in front of others? Why is Bodhisattva here today?" He was a Luohan, while the person in front of him had cultivated to the Bodhisattva realm, which was the so-called saint realm. However, there wasn't much respect in his tone. There were people who had given up on the hope of improving themselves and only wished to live longer. In his eyes, there wasn't anything worthy of respect. He didn't bother much, placing his palms together and keeping silent. "Why is your face so bitter every time we meet? Even if you're ascetic Zen, you don't have to be like this." Ling Hai's brow rose up, and then he thought about it. Bodhisattva came because of the endless darkness and unlimited light. The monk's eyes lit up, and he nodded his head. Ling Hai asked once more, "Because you are the venerable of this world, you can't reveal anything to others? Speaking of which, do you know who the unlimited beginning and end Buddha that the few Buddhas are talking about?" The monk nodded his head once more. His eyes were filled with anticipation. At this moment, Ling Hai smiled. "Is this person related to Tsang Xingdao?" The monk nodded decisively. Although he couldn't show any joy on his face, he was overjoyed in his heart. He thought that this junior who was in charge of the Pure Land sect was indeed smart. Only to hear Ling Hai continue. "And this person is in Gantian Mountain?" This time, the monk hesitated slightly. However, he nodded his head, thinking that the person should have already returned to Gantian. That was the capital of his country, where his foundation was located. Seeing this, Ling Hai burst into laughter. Only when the monk opposite him revealed a puzzled expression did he stop. Actually, a female disciple of my sect has already found that person. Is it Zhao Yanran from the Seven Spirits sect? This time, the monk was stunned. Zhao Yanran? Who the hell was this? Shouldn't it be that Gantian Mountain Monster King Zhong Shou, Song Shengdao, and Tan Xiu? About a month ago, my martial nephew saw this woman use the limitless darkness divine ability with his own eyes. There shouldn't be any mistake. Ling Hai smiled like he was really happy. Originally, I wasn't sure. To form the unlimited darkness dharma, one needs to have a dual meridian body. As for that, Gantian Mountain Monster King Zhong Shou, he has a higher chance. However, I investigated and found out that the Tianzhao source a few months ago was the Song Shengdao Palace. 3 months ago, this Zhao Yanran was coincidentally there, which made me even more suspicious. Today, with Senior's reminder, I was able to confirm it. This woman is really fated to be able to open up such a Dao. The monk was slightly stunned when he heard this. He wanted to open his mouth, but he couldn't. He didn't mind his life to exchange for this chance for the Buddhist faction. However, the heart demon oath from 10,000 years ago was too heavy, and it was the only thing that had no flaws. He was afraid that the moment he opened his mouth, he would die. His expression instantly became even more bitter, and his brows furrowed. However, he had always been like that. Even when he was happy, he couldn't smile. Opposite him, Ling Hai didn't seem to be able to tell at all. He had a confident expression on his face. He couldn't help but look at him speechlessly. In the past, he felt that this fellow was really smart. However, looking at it now, he only felt that this Ling Hai was really dumb. He really wanted to use a hammer to knock him awake. He was slightly worried. He couldn't directly open his mouth and couldn't use any methods to hint at him. How should he remind this person? If the unlimited beginning and end Buddha returned, combining the strength of all Buddhas to open up a peaceful world, why would he need to rely on this cloud world to survive? What a pity! Pretty much just as the monk was thinking about the unlimited beginning and end Buddha, in the night sky, a bright light appeared above Gantian Mountain. After it stopped, a white-robed teen stood on the shining spiritual light sword. It was Zhong Shou. Looking carefully below, he saw a camp 40 miles away from Gantian Mountain City. There were only 10,000 tents and around 20,000 people. They were the elite cavalry that he brought to mysterious Cloud Mountain. In that battle, there were thousands of casualties. However, the other people all returned safely. However, a large portion of them should have been sent to various parts of Donglin to take revenge, especially the Black Fox cavalry who weren't there anymore. At this moment, Gantian Mountain City was filled with lanterns and decorations. It was a joyous occasion. Zhong Shou's brows rose up. He knew that Hu Zhongyuan and the others were waiting for him to return before they entered the city in triumph. Gantian Mountain's victory at the foot of mysterious Cloud Mountain was indeed worth celebrating and calming down the hearts of the people. However, thinking back to what he saw not long ago near Cloud Saint City, Zhong Shou's heart couldn't help but sink. He was just short of sighing. That monster from Demon Corpse Mountain along with the 9 Death Emperor. If they appeared together, what would happen? Why was he so dumb at the start? Of all the places he could have buried, why did he have to personally bury such a huge problem for himself? It seemed like the heavens weren't willing to see him be delighted. Oh, his heart felt a stabbing pain. Zhong Shou's eyes were dark and sunken as he looked towards where his spiritual sense felt weird. Then, he felt an aura fade away. It disappeared without a trace in his spiritual sense, and he didn't feel anything weird about it. Zhong Shou's brows couldn't help but furrow. This person was really good at hiding his presence. If he wasn't too confident and spread his spiritual sense to 1,000 feet around him, he wouldn't have been able to do anything. His spiritual sense wouldn't have been affected at all. Moreover, this technique was a little familiar. It seemed to be the illusionary heart mirror. It wasn't a replica in his hands, but the real one. Someone cast a spell from several worlds away, using the power of the illusionary heart mirror to help this person hide his tracks. Speaking of which, this person was from the Shui family. In these few years, The eight-tail Shui family didn't do anything. He thought that this bloodline had given up on attacking Gantian Mountain. Who knew that at this moment, they would show their tracks? How dare you? Laughing coldly, Zhongshu didn't bother about him, directly descending towards the peak of Gantian Mountain. The barracks outside was just a formality. With such a comfortable place like the Hanyan Palace, Zhongshu wasn't willing to go to the barracks to suffer. The moment he returned to the palace, he saw that the people who brought him back were already waiting in the Chongjin Hall. Apart from Xinyuan Irin and the other girls, along with Lei Dong and Jinbu Hui, there were a bunch of old officials from Gantian Mountain. They were all pumped up as they bowed towards Zhongshu. They were bowing to him in advance. Even Rinbo, who had always been steady and mature, lost his composure slightly. If it was in the past, Zhongshu would be delighted and enjoy the flattery of these officials. However, at this moment, he didn't have such thoughts. He could only smile and speak gently to send these people away. What was slightly surprising was that Kong Yao, who was supposed to be in charge of the East Conquering Army, was also here. Moreover, she looked over with a disdainful gaze. When Zhongshu looked over, Kong Yao scoffed coldly, turning her head to the side and not exchanging glances with him, thinking to herself that if it was their Taishang emperor who faced such a situation, he would definitely rest outside the city and share the hardships with his subordinates. How was Zhongshu like a wise ruler? However, thinking about that, Kong Yao's expression dimmed. She probably wouldn't be able to return to the Taishang and the Gong family. Thinking about how sad she was, she couldn't help but shed tears. Zhongshu didn't understand, looking towards Rinny. When he wasn't here, Xinyuan Irin was the ruler of Gantian Mountain and should know about this matter. Xinyuan Irin's expression was really weird. She took out a scroll and placed it in front of Zhongshu. This is the letter that the Taishang envoy handed over a few days ago. I made the decision to ask Sister Kong Yao to return. The scroll was bright yellow in color and had dragon patterns drawn on it. It seemed to contain the king energy that he was really familiar with, just that it was thicker and thicker. Zhongshu's expression slowly turned serious. As expected, this was the letter of the heavens. When he opened it and took a look at it, he couldn't believe his eyes. He blinked once more and saw clearly that it was indeed those words. There is a Lady Kong who is virtuous and virtuous. Today she will marry the ruler of your country to form a good relationship between Qin and Jin. Also from now on, the two countries will forever be brothers, etc. Zhongshu wasn't able to react, his mind a little distracted. This future undefeatable famous general, Taishang ruler god, was married off to the Taishang so easily. It even came from the mouth of the ruler of the Taishang. A moment later, he came back to his senses. At this moment, Kong Yao was just showing her talent. She didn't have many battle achievements and was far from being a famous general. On the contrary, Gantian Mountain had taken over Donglin Cloud Continent and had become a strong country in the east. At that moment, he couldn't help but have the urge to laugh out loud. Conquering the outer regions, he was worried about not having any talents. This was like meeting a pillow when he wanted to sleep. He opened his mouth and smiled. Zhongshu thought back to Gong Shinran and instantly froze, the corner of his eyes twitching. When Xinyuan Irin saw that he was so happy, she was slightly sad. Actually, she was prepared and knew that, as a ruler, Zhongshu wouldn't fall in love with her alone. However, at this moment, she felt a little sad. Was Asho so happy to be able to get this Kong Yao? Chapter 565. In the blink of an eye, Zhongshu's expression dimmed. Xinyuan Irin felt that something wasn't right. Her brows furrowed as she thought about Zhongshu's trip to the Oblivion Cloud Ocean. Instantly, her eyes were filled with sadness. You weren't able to find Uncle this time? When Zhongshu heard that, he laughed bitterly and knew that Xinyuan Irin had misunderstood. What he was worried about had nothing to do with this. However, he couldn't easily tell others that Zhong Weiran was still alive. He trusted this future chess piece, but at this moment, it was not the time to say such things. Shaking his head and not replying, Zhongshu casually tossed the letter into the trash bin at the side. showing no respect at all. This caused Kong Yao to be furious, but she didn't feel anything, turning her eyes to Xian Yuan ear inside, only to see an old man sitting there. He looked like he was 70 years old, but the life force in his body couldn't even be compared to a young man like him. May I ask if this old mister is the head of Pill Fountain Sect, Irin's master, old man Mingdan? The old man's eyes opened wide. Without needing Xian Yuan Irin to introduce him, he stood up and bowed. I am Mingdan, greetings, ruler. My Pill Fountain Sect's change has made a joke out of us. What is there to laugh at? Zhongshou laughed like he didn't care at all. The spiritual wave is about to rise, and these alien races are swarming over. Especially the shadowless demon race, which is the hardest to deal with. In ancient times, numerous sects and dynasties were destroyed by them. For the sect leader to be able to protect our foundations is a huge credit to Pill Fountain Sect. This matter has nothing to do with the sect leader. Only, the moment those words were said, Zhongshou's tone changed, his expression turning serious. As the ruler, rewards and punishments are clear. We can't be biased. This battle started because of Pill Fountain Sect. Because of Irin, I won't punish you. However, in the future, all the pills that Pill Fountain Sect produces will have to give us 40%. Xinyuan Irin was startled when she heard that. Just as she was about to speak, Samarim viciously stared at her. He should be punished, but 40% was just too huge. He had recovered long ago and made up for the weaknesses of the mysterious moon with Brilliance method. However, he was like a turtle, not coming out of seclusion. He wanted to let Xinyuan Irin take the pressure alone. Even if he had various worries and reasons, he wouldn't be understanding. How would he let Mingdan's, of course? Mingdan heaved a sigh of relief. Instead, she stopped Xinyuan Irin and bowed towards Zhongshou. Mingdan understands. Ruler has saved our sect this time. The entire Elixir Spring sect is extremely grateful. If there's yes, I'll TS SS of SSS. It was a pity that the Pill Fountain sect would never let go of 40% of the pills they produced. Of Tess, yes, S2's he of the of he to be of a thinking about it. He felt that their future was dark. Smiling helplessly, Zhongshou finally smiled as he looked towards Lei Dong and Jin Buhui. After dealing with so many things, he almost neglected these two brothers. At this moment, Zhao Yanran was at the side, looking over like she had something to say to him. However, this crazy woman, he should just act like he didn't see anything, ignoring her. The fragrance was thick, the cool and sweet wine flowed into his throat. When it sank into his stomach, it instantly turned into a ball of flame. It caused one's body to heat up, but also feel really comfortable and excited. Good wine. This is the blazing flame fragrance? To be able to brew such good wine, she really is a special girl. If I have time in the future, I will definitely meet this Miss Jinru. Another cup. However, at this moment, Leidong's face was ashen white. There seemed to be stars spinning in his eyes. His mind was in a daze, and he couldn't think clearly. He seemed like he was about to fall to the ground. His mind only knew one thing. He definitely couldn't drink this wine anymore. There seemed to be dozens of jugs of such wine in his heaven and earth bag. However, today, even if he was beaten to death, he wouldn't take it out. He was a wine tycoon, able to drink 1,000 cups and not get drunk. However, today, he totally fell to his knees here. The two of them competed, drinking a total of 17 jugs of celestial wine, like the blazing flame fragrance. However, at this moment, he couldn't drink anymore. This was the first time he had met a match. This fellow obviously didn't know how to drink in the past. Zhongshou laughed. Today, he took revenge for what happened when they became sworn brothers, so he didn't go overboard. Jin Buhui sighed beside him. Senior brother, Lei Dong's life of brilliance has been destroyed today. His tones seemed to be filled with regret, but his eyes were filled with schadenfreude. He reached out a finger and waved it in front of Lei Dong, asking how many it was. When Lei Dong curiously replied that it was 8, he couldn't help but laugh out loud. Following which, his expression turned serious as he asked Zhongshou, "Brother Shou, just returned from the east. Did you go to Gong Shinran's tomb? You've been worried and puzzled just now. Are you worried about this? That's right. Zhong Shou's expression turned cold. Looking at the situation there, in a year or two, that Nine Death Emperor will act. Who knows if at that time it will still be her? Jin Buhui's brows rose up, knowing what Zhong Shou meant. If Gong Xinran still had consciousness, then both sides could still talk about face. If not, then they could only fight to the death. I was originally worried. However, you have the Blood Cloud Cavalry in your hands. Even if the Death Emperor appears, what do you have to fear? Zhong Shou shook his head and didn't speak. This netherworld technique countered the Blood Cloud Cavalry. Following which Jin Buhui said, "After I return, I will ask Master to think of a way to seal her with all the sections. Each Nine death, which that appears will cause 1,000 miles of land to turn red. This isn't just your family's matter." Only then did Zhong Shou smile. However, he didn't comment on the words of all the sects working together. This matter was like fishing the moon in the water. One could imagine that it definitely wouldn't succeed. It was destined to be like drawing water with a bamboo basket. The only one he could truly rely on was Tsang Xingdao. This brother of his was born with a warm heart. As long as one was recognized as a friend, he would go all out to get along. Since the battle 10 days ago, when he led people over and risked his life to save him, he knew about it. This was why he had to think of another way to deal with Gong Xinran. At this moment, Jin Buhui was silent once more. He hesitated for a long while before opening his mouth to ask, "Brother Shou has already unified Donglin Cloud Continent, and your military strength is the top of the overseas countries. Do you want to take over the Central Cloud Continent next?" Zhong Shou smiled. He knew that Jin Buhui would ask about this matter. Although Haoshuan's sect was a cultivator sect, it had many connections with the Confucians. It could be said that they were indirectly working for the Taishan. If he wanted to take over the throne, then Haoshuan's sect and Jin Buhui would be stuck in between. He didn't hesitate to think about it. Zhong Shou shook his head. "I didn't mean to. Before the Taishan collapses, I won't easily step into the Central Cloud Continent. If I have a way, I would like to try to conquer the outer region." Jin Buhui heaved a sigh of relief. It was for the best if that was the case. The last sentence caused his body to stiffen. The outer realm? It was like he had heard a preposterous and unbelievable thing. Yes, outer region. Are only others allowed to invade our cloud world, and we can't fight our way out? While speaking, Zhong Shou's eyes shone with a clear glow. He wasn't the one who said those words first, but that person. At this moment, he should already be preparing to conquer that other world. Jin Buhui still felt that it was preposterous. He didn't understand and didn't know what to say. He simply turned his head and looked down deeply at the ground. The three of them weren't polite people. Although they didn't go all out, they were open-minded and unrestrained. The place they chose to drink was at the top of a cliff in Hanyao Palace. Looking down, he could see the entire city in his eyes. He said leisurely, "During these few days, I have walked around Gantian Mountain. Here, the people can live and work peacefully, smiling all the time. Within 1,000 miles, the farmers are all exempted from taxes. How unbelievable." Zhong Shou was startled, a little lost. Their Gantian Mountain, towards those farmers? They didn't collect taxes? Why didn't he know about that? Focusing, Zhong Shou tried his best to recall before he recalled. A few months ago, when he returned to Gantian Mountain, Rimbaud sent people to carry over a large pile of documents for him to sign. At that time, he didn't care much. Anyways, the few people in his cabinet had already discussed it. It didn't involve military matters, so there was nothing wrong with it. Thus, he didn't take a close look. Thus, they all agreed. It was said that at this moment, Gantian Mountain was prosperous. Just the tax alone reached tens of millions, several times that of before. At this moment, the Cloud Ocean hunts also had many gains. Compared to that, the farm taxes were like a drop in the ocean. If they continued to collect, it would instead give those officials a chance to take advantage of them. It would be better to exempt all of them and save some manpower for tax collectors. Moreover, the business was too prosperous and many people ran to the city to be helpers for a higher income. On the contrary, no one would be well-behaved and work with the soil. At that time, what did he say? He didn't say anything, generously waving his brush and agreeing to this matter. Thinking about it now, he was filled with regret, pounding his chest and stomping his feet. This boy really wasn't a good person. The key was that he was rich in the past, so he didn't care. However, at this moment, he was really poor. His eyes were green with envy towards all sources of wealth. It seemed like when he returned, he had to think of a way to test if he could raise taxes. Or maybe he could raise the ratio between the treasury and the palace treasury. Giving an awkward smile, Zhongshu heard Jin Buhui say, "My Taishang emperor has ruled for decades and is really wise. However, in the 9 states under my rule, the people can't be as prosperous as your Gantian mountain, and the people are rich. It is really unfair. You train in the sword and martial arts every day and don't bother with politics." How did that happen? Actually, during these days, I was thinking about what would happen if you were the Taishang emperor. Just as he spoke, he saw Lei Dong's body shake. His whole body rolled down from the eaves. The two of them exchanged glances and instantly burst out laughing. Chapter 566. Just as Kong Yao hesitated, Zhongshu heard numerous noises ringing out in his ears. It's the ruler. It's really the ruler in the carriage. Looking at his face, he looks really good. The ancient said something about natural beauty. It should be like that. He looks even more handsome than women. So our ruler is a kid who looks less than 16 years old. Oh, he looks even younger than my kid. Zhongshu was instantly furious. What nonsense was this? Shouldn't these people be praising and discussing his victory at mysterious Cloud Mountain? That was the 3rd spiritual house, close to the strength of a shrine. Also, he was about to unify Donglin. Since the 5 continents split up, even the few dynasties in Donglin Cloud Continent weren't able to do that. Luckily, there were people who scolded them. What nonsense are you saying? This is a saint ruler that is hard to see in thousands of years. Our Donglin is in chaos and war. Have you ever thought about such a life? Of course. In such a chaotic world, people are worse than dogs. It is unimaginable for our Gantian mountain to be so prosperous. The 2nd generation of the ruler, father and son, is a rare hero. I heard that in a few more days, the last few cities in the east will be taken down by Chio and Zone. TSK. This time, those country bumpkins in the east will benefit from it. I only hope that there are a few less directly governed cities. That's right. Any directly governed city will have people to rely on and take care of the old. Recently, I heard that they are exempt from agriculture taxes. How could there be such a good thing in the past? Unfortunately, it is only agriculture taxes. If only the commerce taxes could be exempted. Zhongshu felt comforted when he heard that. These were the good people under his rule. However, exempt from taxes? Don't even think about it. Moments later, he heard people discussing, "Our ruler is good at everything. He is just too perverted. There are actually 5 to 6 women in the carriage. Isn't that right? I heard that even the Taishang emperor of the Central Cloud Continent couldn't do anything to the ruler. Why not just marry that surnamed Kong girl to the ruler as his concubine? That woman was unwilling at the start. However, half a month ago, wasn't she subdued by the ruler? Rumor has it that he once commanded the army on behalf of the emperor. At first, Kong Yao could still look down and ignore it. At this moment, she felt wronged, wringing her hands together. Yes, I heard that he brought back a nun this time. He has already returned to the secular world, but it seems that he used to be a member of the Pure Land School. Pure Land School? Could it be the unvoiced spiritual realm? Zhongshu's luck with women was indeed not shallow. To actually be able to make a woman of the unvoiced spiritual realm return to the secular world, was this really extraordinary? It was said that the women there were as beautiful as fairies, but unfortunately, none of them were devoted to Buddhism. What's so good about this lamp and Buddha statue? Jingyin was no longer calm as she hurriedly lowered her head and kept chanting the primordial ancient Buddha and the Great Tranquility Sutra. If he had known earlier, he would not have accepted Zhao Yinran's threat and boarded the jade carriage. Zhao Yinran was laughing so hard that she almost fell down. However, the people behind her are talking about her. There's also someone from the Seven Spirits sect. He's the head disciple of this generation. The women of the beautiful demon sect are best at bed and male and female cultivation techniques. Who knows if the ruler can control them? Startled, Zhao Yinran's eyes were filled with killing intent. Following which she laughed, looking provocatively at Zhongshu. Zhongshu's neck shrunk, his body shuddering as he leaned back. He had no interest in this woman. However, this retreat caused Zhao Yinran to fly into a rage out of humiliation. The chariot slowly passed through and entered another path. On the roof, the young scholar was still in a daze. His eyes were filled with disbelief as he muttered to himself. Saint King energy? Saint King? How is that possible? So clear and pure, so grand and majestic, there are no impurities at all. The muscular man beside him didn't hear clearly, his brows furrowing. Junior brother, what did you say? Nothing. The teen scholar was awoken by his words, shaking his head. Even if he said what he saw, other people wouldn't believe him. Moreover, such a matter was really important. It was safest to keep it in his heart and not speak of it to others. This matter involved the secrets of the heavens, and if he wasn't careful, he might be implicated. I just noticed a familiar person. Have you seen the little miss of the Kong family? Kong Yao, the muscular man smiled. I heard that recently this little miss of the Kong family has been married to the princess of the Qing family. She is married to the ruler of this place as a concubine of the Taishang emperor. Actually, she is a girl and should marry to help her husband and raise her children. What is the point of fighting alongside men on the battlefield? The scholar smiled, knowing that his senior brother always looked down on girls. Actually, just now I used a heaven-viewing talisman that Master gave me. Oh. Only then did the muscular man's expression calm down, revealing a weird expression. The heaven-viewing talisman was said to be able to see the changes in one's fate. However, he knew that this scholar only had 3 of them. Master gave them to him to choose the master of the heavens. To think that he would actually use one of them here. Did junior brother notice that there was something weird about this Kong Yao? Before he asked, the teen scholar had already nodded his head slightly. Looking at her fate, she's like a goshawk flying in the sky. The aura is sharp and tough to block, the white light charging into the bowl, gathering thousands of stars like the light of the Alcade descending. The muscular man frowned once more, his eyes filled with shock. How did that happen? Because of his master, he knew that this Taishang Grand Teacher had once commented on this girl. This girl's fate was normal, and in the world, she was just a good general and could be used at the border. If she was used too much, her fate would be too strong, and she wouldn't be able to take it and would fall early. His master had a good relationship with the Kong family, and because the Kong family was in charge of the Taishang Imperial Astronomer, they had a secret technique to observe fate. He felt that Zhongshuan was purposely rejecting her, and that his words weren't true, which was why he specially went to take a look. In the end, after he returned, he sighed and didn't speak. Later on, he heard that this girl had won a few battles in the north. He loved military matters and had analyzed it before, but it was just normal. Using numbers to fight against a few, any good general would be able to win easily. He was confident that he could easily defeat them on the battlefield. However, based on some of the books that he had read from his master in the past, this girl was like an eagle. The sign of an eagle flying was a sign of her rising up. The white light charging into the heavens would lead the troops. Gathering thousands of stars meant that she wanted to control an army. As for the so-called Alcade, the 7th star of the Big Dipper actually had another name. Breaking the army. Junior brother, did you see wrongly? He asked suspiciously, only to see the teen scholar suddenly understand and laugh. So that was the case. This girl was really normal when she was a general, at most a little outstanding, but she was a commander talent. She can't compare to you, but she is a general. In the Taishang dynasty, those hundreds of thousands of troops couldn't show her ability. General Zhongshuan and our master have probably made a mistake. The muscular man blinked, only feeling that it was unbelievable. A general? A commander talent? Did this girl really have such ability? He didn't believe that even people like his master and Zhongshuan couldn't see clearly. How could a person like you, who can only see through someone's heaven-viewing talisman, know? That teen scholar didn't want to be entangled in this matter. He had to make the man believe him. It wasn't because it involved the ruler Long Shi and the changes in the situation. It wasn't inappropriate to discuss things like Kong Yao. However, he still had to worry about it. Unfortunately, all those who could see the path of fate were unable to do so themselves. There were also many variables. If there was a change, it would cause a chain reaction and change everywhere, making one unable to grasp it. If he could shine a heaven-seeing talisman on himself, wouldn't he be able to see the future? Seek luck and avoid calamity? He turned to look below the roof at those people who were still cheering. Even if that jade carriage had left long ago, they were still really excited. They all discussed and weren't willing to leave. A thoughtful look appeared in the scholar's eyes. Senior brother, in your eyes, what is Gantian Mountain like? It is indeed a prosperous country and peaceful people. No, it is a strong country and rich people. The people here truly love and respect the ruler of this country. That burly man answered without hesitation. He also looked down at the streets, only to see that the streets were filled with muscular martial cultivators. Even the women were quite brave and incomparably valiant. Most of them were dressed in fine brocade clothes. Moreover, they are really martial. If they recruit troops here, their combat strength will be really strong. The teen scholar nodded his head slightly. His focus wasn't here. This place doesn't restrict soldiers. Strong bows and crossbows can be carried by everyone. The brute was slightly stunned, looking carefully as expected. Pretty much everyone had weapons on them. Bows and crossbows were also casually carried on their backs. There were even many spiritual weapons and artifacts. He knew that the Taishang dynasty had banned martial arts for many years. He also knew that there was a ban on long weapons and crossbows. All spiritual weapons and artifacts needed a special identity to be able to be worn and treasured. This was to prevent people from fighting as well as local tyrants. It was good governance. Why did his junior brother specially mention this matter? That teen scholar continued. This place also doesn't restrict people from talking. Oh, the brute was still confused. That was indeed true. If it was in the central cloud continent, within the Taishang dynasty. If the people dared to say such disrespectful words and discuss, they would have been caught by the bailiffs and charged with disrespect. Whether or not they could get away would depend on the mood of the higher-ups and whether or not they paid enough silver. However, what did this matter have to do with them? After the teen scholar finished, he didn't explain. Instead, he asked, Senior brother, you are prepared to join Gantian Mountain? That's right. Master said that my fate isn't right. If I was in the central cloud continent, I would definitely die. Instead, I might be able to achieve something at the borders. My uncle Rimbois is the prime minister of Gantian Mountain and can join them. At least this place is peaceful. Although that teen ruler's actions are a little preposterous, under his rule they are slowly becoming stronger and the people are safe. I heard that he is really nice to his subordinates and rewards and punishments are clear. As he said that, the brute gave out a self-mocking laugh, at least here. There are no excessive taxes, and there is nothing that I can't stand. I am too lazy to go to other places and suffer from that. The teen scholar smiled and nodded. Great. I also want to stay here and take a look. The brute was instantly shocked, thinking to himself that didn't his junior brother have his eyes on those few people in the central cloud continent. Chapter 567. In the imperial capital, Emperor Yuanshin's brows furrowed as he sized up the map in front of him. He had used 4 era names. The last one was Yuanshin. His real name was Inu. However, people couldn't directly call him by his name and could only refer to him by his year. That map showed the entire cloud world, the 5 continents and 12 islands. At this moment, the cloud continent in the east had totally turned red. This Longxiang mountain city is also broken. Although it was a question, no one in the hall answered for a moment. Be it internal affairs, junior supervisor Guruo, or Zhongshuan, they didn't know the exact situation of Donglin Cloud Continent. Inyu didn't care much. Only he had seen the message talisman from the east. He just subconsciously said those words. Sighing, Inyu's eyes squinted, filled with emotions. Longxiang Mountain City has fallen. Donglin has totally fallen into the hands of that kid. Sigh, this kid is just 20 years old and has taken over for less than 4 years. If I, Inyu, could have such a kid, then I wouldn't have to worry after I die. Taishan's country luck would still be at its peak. There was an indescribable envy in his tone. However, following which Inyu's tone changed, filled with cold intent. That marriage letter, did that Gantian Mountain Zone show accept it? Gruwa bowed slightly. The letter has been handed over. Gantian Mountain doesn't seem to have any intentions of rejecting. Scoff. That's what he wants. Inyu scoffed, filled with mocking intent. This zone show actually targeted my beloved general. Destroying my good general, how despicable. Even if he knew that most of the rumors that spread out in Donglin were fake, there was nothing he could do about it. Even if Kong Yao returned, she wouldn't be able to gain a footing in the army. It was better if she didn't return. Your Majesty has thousands of good generals. You don't lack this Kong Yao. The one who spoke was the Grand Commandant who sat on a chair at the side, shaking his head. Every time Miss Kong Yao heads out, she would be really stable, wasting resources. Although he was a good general, he was not outstanding. In the end, she was a woman and did not have the decisiveness and fortitude of a man. Moreover, she was a little too beautiful. I feel that since the Gantian Monster King is lustful, it is a good thing. At the very least, this kid still had a flaw. Lust is a steel knife that scrapes the bone and wears away the will of a hero. This kid is not bad now, but there is still a long time in the future. Inyu frowned. Donglin was far to the east of the cloud world, separated by thousands of miles of sea of clouds. Unless that Zhongsho intended to invade the Donglin cloud continent. No matter what happened to him in the future, it had nothing to do with the Taishan. However, ever since he stamped his seal on the letter of marriage, from time to time, he would feel his heart palpitate, as if he had done something terribly wrong. Today was the worst. For half a day, he was unable to calm down. But when he thought about it carefully, he couldn't figure out the reason. Then, Zhongshuan nodded his head. Your Majesty, you don't have to worry about it. I see that this girl's fate is really normal and is destined to die early. Recently, her brows are filled with bad omens. She also has a golden white energy and will definitely kill many people in her life. She also has a thread of fate connected to our Taishan. With this girl here, she will definitely drag down our Taishan and cause the country to weaken. She is not a good choice for a minister. As for the Kong family, we still need to calm them down. Inyu's brows furrowed. Only then did he calm down. Since that was the case, this Kong Yao Kong family, when I ascended the throne, I owed them a favor. I promised that when I was on the throne, I would let one of them take charge of the military. Looking at their race, only Kong Yao was useful. Instead, they blamed me for not using the few direct descendants and instead promoting a girl. Scoff. They really don't know when to stop. Forget it. If they want it, then let them have it. After laughing coldly, Inyu casually asked, then did Gantian Mountain agree to send troops? While speaking, Inyu was looking at the map between Donglin and the central continent. Close to the central continent, there was a small black dot. This time, Guo replied even more respectfully. Gantian Mountain hasn't replied, but they didn't reject it. I heard that the Lifan Institute is thinking of ways to invite Wujue Villa and Haoshuan sect to persuade them. I heard that these two sects are close to Zhongsho. This matter affects the survival of our Gantian Mountain. I think that Gantian Mountain Monster King wouldn't be so unwise. At this moment, Gantian Mountain is using all sorts of excuses to get more benefits from our Taishan. When he heard the last sentence, Inyu smiled. He was obviously extremely satisfied. In his expectations, the situation was the same, following which his expression turned slightly dark and sunken. He hated sects that had no ruler or father. Haoshuan's sect was slightly better, but if they faced life and death matters, or if the Taishan suppressed them too much, they would be like the other sections. Most of them would be like the other sects, jackals of the same tribe. However, things in the world were like that. Although he hated it, sometimes he had to use it. Just as he thought about that, Inu frowned once more. The fear in his heart didn't calm down because of Zhongshuan's words. Instead, it became more and more serious. Reverend Zhongshuan suddenly stood up as well. His eyes were filled with shock and confusion. Like at the same time, something bad was happening. It seemed to come from the east, but also from within the capital, making it hard for one to deduce where it came from. Feng Shui and divination were like that. Even with his cultivation, he was unable to accurately deduce. Pretty much at the same time, outside of the cloud world, within a space fissure, a beautiful young man was swiftly traveling within the spiritual river. Not long later, he directly broke through the space barrier, stepping within the violent space fissure. In just a moment, he found a place that looked like a palace, but also like a large ship. It was located within the layers of space and couldn't be seen with the naked eye. However, when a young man stepped into this space, it was already there. Walking on the luxuriously decorated ship, there were hundreds of soldiers wearing spiritual artifacts. When he passed, they all half-knelt and bowed. At this moment, if there were cultivators from Donglin Cloud Continent here, they would notice that even the most basic servant was a grade 4 Xiantian. All the warriors wearing spiritual armor were grade 6 and above, which was the so-called grade 6 Dao soldiers. Without exception, they all more or less had the characteristics of the fox race. The young man was used to it and didn't care. He walked all the way to the lower level and pushed open a door. This place was different from the other parts of the ship. Only this place didn't have any decorations or luxurious items, giving off a simple and elegant feeling. The moment he pushed open the door, the young man heard a voice ring out from within. "Are you Ma Fei?" That voice was old, but it had a far greater penetrating power than normal people, like a long needle stabbing right into the heart. The young man instantly bowed. "It is Xuan Ma Fei." Behind the door, it was pitch black. Even with Xuan Ma Fei's cultivation, he was unable to see what was happening within. However, he was still really respectful, his eyes filled with respect. "To go and spy on that Zhongshu, you are really bold." As expected, then a scolding sounded out. "If I didn't warn you, even if you used the illusionary heart mirror to cover, you would have been noticed by that Zhongshu. Do you really want to spoil my plans before you are willing to stop?" Xuan Ma Fei didn't dare to argue, keeping silent. He only wanted to know what kind of person killed Xuan Moyan and ascended at such a young age, establishing such a huge foundation. "Then, did you gain anything from your trip?" "Yes." Xuan Ma Fei knelt on the ground. "I was in Gantia Mountain, looking at the various races. All of them are sincerely convinced by that person. In fact, even that human loved and respected him greatly. The Zhong family direct bloodline has been wiped out. The remaining few lucky survivors are all convinced by him. The combat strength of the Blood Cloud cavalry was even more powerful. My Shui clan has probably arrived a few days late. It won't be easy to take back the power from the Zhong family. Speaking of which, that Zhongshu has no loopholes to take advantage of." As the voice spoke, it was filled with rage. The intent was like a raging wave, surging out from the depths of the room. Xuan Ma Fei's expression didn't change, slightly shaking his head. "To other people, there's indeed no loophole to take advantage of. However, to our Shui family, it isn't the case. After all, this person has the Sky Fox bloodline, and we can only attack from the bloodline. If we use the right method, we might be able to use this Zhongshu for our race. However, this kid has the sky-burning bloodline, and we need to deal with him first. If not, our Sky Fox bloodline won't be able to suppress him." "Attack from the bloodline? Based on what you were saying, you want me to reduce my lifespan?" His tone was flat, but it was filled with a questioning intent. Xuan Ma Fei didn't dare to argue, only being more respectful as he knelt on the ground. Luckily, the voice also calmed down. "Forget it. Originally, only the 9-tailed beast could subdue the 7-tailed beast's blood. If our Shui family can return to the cloud world. So what if I reduce my lifespan by 500? This Zhong family probably thinks that they have run Gantian Mountain like an iron bucket. It seems like we need to let them know why only our Shui family is the Sky Fox Emperor race. Shui Mafe instantly straightened his body, joy flashing in his eyes. Then he frowned, still worried. However, what I am worried about is that Long Ing Ao Kun. This Zhong Shou is really strong. Spirit realm cultivators can't enter the cloud world, so we can't do anything to him. Also, the Blood Cloud cavalry isn't weak. They can even fight against Shun Xiao and cause him to fall. However, that voice scoffed coldly, filled with disdain. Long Ing Ao Kun? What is there to fear? The two of them have many ways to restrict each other. Aren't you worried about the sky burning blood on Zhong Shou's body? Don't worry. Your knowledge is too shallow. In my eyes, this is the most fatal weakness of Zhong Shou. If not for us worrying about the Blood Cloud cavalry, our Shui family elite Dao soldiers wouldn't have all arrived. We would have taken over Gantian Mountain long ago. His words were filled with arrogance. In the Hanyan Palace at the peak of Gantian Mountain, in the spacious Chongzheng Hall, Zhong Shou exclaimed and spat out a breath on a jade seal. Then, he fiercely slammed it down. Instantly, a bright red mark appeared on the bright yellow brocade. Chapter 568. This was his newly engraved seal, prepared for the upcoming coronation ceremony. There were a total of 8 words, receiving orders from the heavens, long life and prosperity. There was nothing new about it, but since every ruler and emperor dynasty was like that, Zhong Shou could only follow the tradition and was too lazy to create anything new. Only the line of words under him was a little different. The seal of Gantian country ruler was written on it. Looking at the silk, it was made from 100-year dragon silk. The dye was also really expensive. Based on what Rimbois and the other officials said, they couldn't use beast leather anymore. Normal paper couldn't be used either. Since they're already a big country, then they should have the aura of a big country. Some money couldn't be saved. The words on the silk made Zhong Shoxin's heart tighten. Without needing to look at other things, just the 82 million grade 4 beast crystals made one's heart jump. This was what Zhong Shou said himself, to compensate the soldiers who died in battle, as well as reward the army after the victory. Although they won the battle, pretty much all the slightly bigger powers in Donglin Cloud Continent were wiped out. However, it wasn't perfect. Just as he led all the elite cavalry to the foot of mysterious Cloud Spirit Mountain. The 360 towns of Gantian Mountain, along with the hundreds of thousands of elites of Xian Mountain City, bitterly blocked the attacks of the Thousand City Alliance, losing close to 300,000 people. Calculating it carefully, along with the consumption of the 3 million troops, as well as the subsequent expansion of the army, the number was so huge that it pretty much used up all the Gantian Mountain treasury. He even needed to take out a portion of the expected income from his money bag to supplement it. His heart felt pained, and he wasn't willing to look at it anymore. Zhong Shou hurriedly rolled up the silk in his hand and threw it to the corner of the table. He took in several deep breaths before his heart calmed down. However, he was still really conflicted. On the opposite side of the desk, Rimbois was standing there calmly. Seeing the situation, he couldn't help but find it amusing. Taking the imperial decree in his hand and opening it to take a look, his eyes were filled with shock. Your Highness is so generous. 82 million grade 4 beast crystals. Even the most basic soldier would be able to gain a lot this time. However, the state treasury is unable to take out this sum of money. Zhong Shou waved his hand and said unhappily, "We can borrow from the palace treasury for the time being. However, you'll have to pay me back in the future. This time, it's 20% interest per month." This time, Rimbois didn't argue about the amount of interest. Instead, he looked at Zhong Shou weirdly. "I thought that since your Highness couldn't raise taxes, then you would reduce the reward." Zhong Shou laughed coldly, thinking that although Zhong Shou, do not know much about the way of governing a country, I know how to win over the army's heart. At this time, no matter how much his heart ached, he had to take out the money. The spiritual wave had just started, and Gantian Mountain was far from being able to relax. "Then we'll do as monarch commands." Rimbo smiled, bowed, and accepted the decree. Then he asked, "Then what does monarch intend to do about the Taishang alliance's request?" Zhongshu frowned. He wanted to divide his forces to conquer the outside world. However, he could not care about this matter. That space fissure was actually closer to the central cloud continent. However, Gantian Mountain had to take responsibility. Then he sighed. Lingyun's sect's strength was greatly weakened. Gantian Mountain's sects either fled or were wiped out. Gantian Mountain had to take responsibility for such a matter. Now, he could only get more benefits from the Taishang. Apart from 500 towns, expand 200,000 elite cavalry. Luckily, Gantian Mountain was unified and they only needed to force the cities to reduce their troops. Once Donglin calmed down, the burden would be lighter. However, it wasn't good to have no war. That place could be used to train troops. Before the spiritual wave, he was prepared to change all the towns of Gantian Mountain to Xuanwu masters. Apart from that, he needed at least 100,000 grade 4 experts to form an elite force. Thinking about it, they needed to conquer the outside world to plunder resources. Rimbo nodded his head and knew that expanding the elite cavalry was to deal with this matter. Then, he looked around. Then does this palace need to be expanded and rebuilt? The Hanyan Palace at the peak of Gantian Mountain was called a palace. Actually, some of the city lord manors in Donglin were several times better than this. It was built during Zone Weiron's era and was completed not long after Gantian Mountain City was built. In the past, it was still okay. Now, compared to Gantian Mountain's position in the cloud world, it could only be called simple and crude. Zhongshu was tempted when he heard that. He also felt that this palace was too simple. He only had 2 pursuits in his life. One was to pursue the pinnacle of martial arts, and the other was to live a good life. It was the wish of Tanxio in his previous life after he was lonely when he was young. It could almost be said to be an obsession. However, thinking about it, Zhongshu couldn't help but sigh. It wasn't that he didn't want to repair it, but that he had no money in his pockets. Even if he did, he couldn't bear to spend it and needed to use it on the Book of Ian. No need. This Hanyan Palace can still be used. Let's wait for 2 years. Rinbo was inexplicably touched, bowing. Ruler is wise. After the war, we need to cherish the people and rest up. Ruler is clear in his rewards and punishments, and you do things appropriately. What is amusing is that when Ruler raised taxes, I was worried. Only now did I know that I was worrying for nothing. Today, I thank Ruler on behalf of the Gantian people. With Ruler like this, why would our Gantian Mountain not be strong? His voice was choked with sobs. Zhongshu's mouth opened wide, his face filled with shock. Until Rimbo left, he still wasn't sure what was going on. Shaking his head, Zhongshu got up and walked toward the back of the hall. He saw a young girl dressed in white standing quietly under the moonlight, looking up at the sky. Although there were guards around, no one came to bother her. Zhongshu frowned, thinking to himself that this posture of looking up at the sky was quite popular. However, at this place, she should be able to hear what was said in the hall. Luckily, what he and Rimbo were discussing today wasn't anything important. However, it seemed like the guards here needed to be taught a lesson. He saw that Kong Yao retracted her gaze from the sky and looked over. The gaze in his eyes was still filled with dead ashes. However, at this moment, it was filled with a weird expression. "This is the Saint Ruler," she muttered softly, questioning herself, not believing, relieved, all sorts of emotions mixed together. Then, Kong Yao was stunned as she walked towards the room at the side. Right before she left, she turned around. "There is a mysterious person hiding in Gantian Mountain City. If Ruler wants, you can send people to investigate. If we can obtain his help, we might be able to achieve great things." She also wasn't sure why she would say such words. After she finished, she walked away in a daze. Zhongshu was confused. However, he was only slightly shocked before he didn't bother anymore. What Saint Ruler? What mysterious person? Did this Kong Yao suffer too much of a blow and become a little crazy? That wasn't good. What he wanted was a commander who could lead thousands of troops and not a crazy girl. As for crazy people, Zhao Yanran alone was enough. It seemed like he still needed Xianyuan Irin and Xianyun Lan to console her. "Since I snatched it over, then it isn't up to you. Returning to his room, along with Zhong Shouxin having a thought, the time flow around him started to slow down. Zhong Shou reached out with his hand and took out the book of Ian Extreme Life. At this moment, he had already flipped open the second page and consumed dozens of years of lifespan. However, his gains were huge. Apart from understanding some basic laws of time, he also understood a lot. He had already started to try to grasp the ability to accelerate time. In the past, Zhong Shou could unknowingly accelerate time by 5 times when he slashed out with his sword. However, he didn't know why. Today, not only could he use time to accelerate by 2 times, but he also knew the theory behind it and knew what he had to do to achieve it. However, the more he studied, the more confused he got. How did the virtual world in his last life manage to accelerate time? He originally thought that it was the result of accelerated thinking. However, the higher his cultivation, the more he understood about the path of heaven and earth, the more he felt that it was impossible. However, this matter was just a side issue. What happened 10,000 years in the future had nothing to do with him, so he was too lazy to bother about it. Today, he chose to use the Ian technique to accelerate time because Zhong Shou wanted to study sword techniques. The mysterious cloud mountain battle allowed him to comprehend numerous things about the sword path, and he needed time to digest them all. This was why, even though he knew that this book of Ian was a bottomless pit that swallowed gold, Zhong Shou didn't hesitate to use it. That was because what he lacked the most now was time. Just like that, standing in the room, Zhong Shou picked up his sword and stabbed forwards. Then, he retracted his sword and stabbed once more. His actions were really normal, and he didn't use any internal energy. However, at every moment, Zhong Shou's internal energy, soul power, and vital energy in his chakra meridians were surging, trying out various paths to find the best way to attack. It was the sword that he stabbed out in front of Long Ying that day in the void. It was the one origin sword absolute beginning. It also corresponded Yang as the absolute beginning, Yin as the end. The one origin sword should have only one sword, and only one sword was needed. However, as time went on, Zhong Shou could only helplessly separate the Yin sword, Yang sword, black sword, and white sword into their own. The more he immersed himself in this Tao, the more he felt how arrogant it was for him to want to merge all the sword wills into one. What he merged wasn't just sword techniques, but also great Tao heavenly rules. Using the Book of Ian to speed up his cultivation, it was already the 45th day. In the first 20 days, Zhong Shou was studying the second page of the Book of Ian Extreme Life to consolidate his spiritual cultivation. 20 days later, Zhong Shou was trying to merge the absolute beginning intent into his sword intent. His progress was really quick, but it still wasn't as good as that day when he stabbed out under the pressure of Shun Xiao and Long Ying. At that time, he felt that he could break through to the peak of the soul realm. He was just a step away from breaking through. However, at this moment, after 20 days of hard work, continuously perfecting and sculpting this sword move, he still couldn't enter it. Was it because his cultivation was still too low? Tossing aside all the random thoughts, Zhong Shou didn't think anymore, continuously improving his internal energy and energy circulation as he visualized the absolute beginning. The sword in his hand slowly gave out the sound of wind and thunder. Only several days later did it finally stop. One more day, and it would be the day of his wedding with Xianyuan Yiren. Chapter 569. Being stared at with such a questioning and vengeful gaze. Even if Zhong Shou's face was as thick as a city wall, he still felt slightly awkward. He smiled and asked, "I could take a look at your mysterious moon with brilliance method." Only then did Xianyuan Yiren's expression turn serious as she looked in her body. Actually, she didn't need to look to know. The blazing flames in his body had already disappeared without a trace. Looking in her body, she was surprised. She could still control the blazing flames, but the 5 elements had started to balance out. "I feel much better." Xianyuan Yiren opened her eyes. her expression filled with emotions. My cultivation has regressed a little, but it is much purer. The cultivation method is also much smoother. I feel that in just a few more days, I can enter grade 7. In the past, even if she reached grade 7, she didn't dare to step in. At that time, just the chill spirit mysterious sense pill recipe that Zhongsho gave her wouldn't be able to suppress it. Now, not to mention grade 7, even breaking through to the spirit realm was no problem. The purity of her true chi was far greater than before. However, it seems like the cultivation method still has some flaws. Within the chakra meridians, there are still many areas that have accumulated. That's normal. With just one night of work, naturally we can't solve them all. To be able to do so is already not bad. So my wife, you and I need to work harder in the future. The moment he said those words, Zhongsho felt that it was too obvious and would scare Xianyuan Irin. He quickly changed his words. Irin, do you feel tired? Actually, it's okay to sleep a little more today. Xianyuan Irin was instantly tempted. Yesterday, she was really tortured badly by Zhongsho. She only felt that she was physically and mentally exhausted. Her legs were soft. A night was the same as fighting with an enemy for several days. Even at this moment, her mind was in a blur and she couldn't think clearly. However, based on the ancient customs, shouldn't we accept the worship of the officials? Zhongsho's eyes were smiling like crescent moons. What worship of the officials? It's okay. My Gantian Mountain has never had such a rule. Today your husband will accompany you. He remembered that Rimbois had made arrangements with several officials from the Ministry of Rites. Today, during the morning court session, all the ministers had an audience with His Majesty. The Queen had to accept the gifts from the ministers one by one before the ceremony was complete. If it was the rules of Donglin Cloud Continent in the past, he would have to show the white silk to everyone. This made Zhongsho shake his head. Luckily, now that Gantian Mountain was a country, such barbarian customs naturally had to be removed. In addition, he also had to offer tea and toast to his parents. However, his parents were not around at this time, so this etiquette was naturally waived. However, Zhongsho did not care about rules and etiquette. What was that saying again? The night of spring is short and the sun rises high. From now on, the emperor does not attend court early. He had never paid attention to political affairs, so it was probably fine for him to continue sleeping with his beloved wife today. Xianyuan Irin half believed and half doubted. Just as she was hesitating, she heard a crisp exclamation from outside the hall. "Young master, your foxtail has been revealed." Zhongsho was shocked and quickly turned to look. Sure enough, a few foxtails had unknowingly stretched out from behind him. There were a total of 7 of them swaying behind him. He hurriedly kept them, feeling weird in his heart. Why did the foxtails run out for no reason? He couldn't control himself as he looked towards the door, only to see Chu Shui and Ruoxue walking from outside. As for Xianyuan Irin, she finally reacted, her face flushed red. She didn't dare to stay together with Zhongsho. Riding her sword and with a schwa, she flew out of the sleeping hall and fled far away. Zhongsho was speechless, thinking to himself that it was a pity. Then he stared viciously at Shui, making Chu Shui feel confused. She was right. The young master's foxtail had been revealed. In the end, the morning court assembly on the second day was completed as per normal. However, from start to finish, Xianyuan Irin didn't dare to look at him. The gazes of all the officials towards Zhongsho were filled with admiration. Amidst the strangeness, there was a hint of admiration. Obviously, the news of what had happened last night had already spread. It also made Xianyuan Irin feel that she had no face to meet others. After the ceremony, she ran back to the pill room, saying that she was going into seclusion for 10 days to prepare to remake the Spirit Salamander Blood Essence pill. At this moment, Aokun had already sent his dragon blood over as a wedding gift for the two of them. Although Xianyuan Irin was making this pill again to avoid Zhongsho, it was barely acceptable. On this day, after the officials met the emperor, it was also time for Lei Dong and Jin Buhui to say goodbye. Zhongsho didn't have any unwilling emotions. Cultivators like them all had lifespans above 1,000 years. In the future, they would have time to meet, not now. However, Zhongsho still sent the two of them out of Gantia Mountain. That day when you and I met, did you think about it? 3 years later, you would have such glory, establishing a country, pretty much invincible in this world. I still remember my uncle. Every time I think about it, I regret it. At that time in front of the sect leader, I should have persevered more. Zhongsho originally thought that before the two of them left, they would mention the matter of guarding that space fissure. In the end, be it Lei Dong or Jinbu Hui, they didn't say a single word. Only the former was a little emotional, following which his tone was filled with hatred. However, I will take revenge for that day. Zhongsho, just you wait. Thinking back to that day, Lei Dong felt furious. Not only did Zhongsho make him drunk, but he didn't even care when he fell off Gantia Mountain. Luckily, his bones were strong, which was why he didn't fall and break. However, he also made a fool of himself. This time when he returned, he would be laughed at by Ruo Tao. He claimed that he loved to drink and wouldn't get drunk even after 1,000 cups. In the end, he was made drunk without any hesitation. Where would his face go? In the past, he was the one who made others drunk. When was he the one who made others drink back? Just as he was speaking, Zhongsho's expression turned serious as he looked towards a direction in the north. His eyes were deep in thought. Lei Dong and Jinbu Hui exchanged glances with one another, their faces filled with astonishment. In just a moment, they both felt something. This direction is the Dragon Canyon. Did the cloud, desolate ruins appear in the world? After roughly estimating the direction, Lei Dong felt that it was weird. The appearance of the Dragon Canyon should be a good thing for Gantia Mountain. At this moment, Donglin was unified, and all the sects close to Lingyun's sect were chased out. With the Blood Cloud Cavalry as a shield, this Dragon Canyon was like Zhongsho's. What was there to worry about? Zhongsho nodded his head silently, thousands of thoughts flashing in his mind. He didn't care about the appearance of the Dragon Canyon. The things within were already seen by him as his personal belongings, especially at this moment when he lacked money. Although Zhong Weiran had plundered first, but because he saw the book of Ian Extreme Life, Zhongsho was really looking forward to it. Since it was related to this book, there must be something unusual about this remnant. However, at this moment, what he cared about the most was when the Dragon Canyon appeared. It was a full 3 months earlier than what he remembered, based on the records in the books of the future. The Dragon Canyon should appear at the end of winter of the 29th year of Yuanqing. Was his memory wrong, or was it true history that was supposed to be like that? Or was it because of something else? If this Dragon Canyon was like that, then what about Demon Corpse Mountain? Would there be changes? At the start, Jinbu Hui's expression was normal, but moments later, his eyes were filled with a weird expression. This aura is so strong. Is it that dragon? No. In that instance, a vast and surging power suddenly swept across the skies of Donglin Cloud Continent. Although they were thousands of miles away, they could still clearly feel it. Even the true qi in their bodies automatically activated to resist. Zhongsho's brows rose up. This aura didn't seem weaker than Shen Xiao. Let's go over and take a look. The moment he said that, he stepped into the air. He hurriedly headed in that direction. 3,000 miles of land, not caring about the consumption of their spiritual power, they arrived in just half a day. Jinbu Hui's cultivation was the weakest, only grade 7. However, with the help of Zhongsho and Lei Dong, he was able to barely keep up. A moment later, a deep canyon covered in black clouds appeared in their field of vision. It was 700 miles wide. Rather than a canyon, it was more like a ring-shaped mountain. Zhongsho landed at the side, following which he looked into the depths of the black mist. The Yin energy within the mist was several times thicker than that of the evil spirit moat. Similar to the Oblivion Cloud Ocean, spiritual sense was unable to reach in at all. Who knows how many people died? However, within the spiritual world, only such a place could produce a Yin dragon. Lei Dong's brows furrowed, revealing a deep thought. Zhongsho nodded his head slightly. Not only did many people die here, but many people also died here. Moreover, most of them were high-grade cultivators, which was why they had such thick, vengeful energy. Based on what he knew, that dragon should have reached the spirit realm level. Logically speaking, such a realm shouldn't be tolerated in the cloud world. However, this beast hadn't appeared in the world. This dragon canyon was similar to a spiritual house or a saint land. This was why it wasn't rejected by the cloud world and no one bothered about it. Normal cultivators were helpless about it. However, that aura just now, as expected, it wasn't a dragon and shouldn't be a living thing. Sensing it carefully, Zhongsho's weird expression became even deeper. It didn't seem like a living thing, but that aura also contained soul power. Was it an artifact spirit? This level was at least a top magical treasure level. That spiritual sense fluctuation seemed to be asking for help. It should be that after 10,000 years, the magical treasure itself was close to dying. What Jin Buhui paid attention to was other things. He took out several talismans and tossed them into the canyon. Moments later, he nodded his head. As expected, the restrictions here have weaknesses. The Dragon Hall was the same. Billions of years. The originally perfect spiritual formation restrictions started to show signs of breaking. At this moment, 10,000 years had passed in the cloud world. The celestial caves and ruins left by the ancient times were mostly broken down and swept clean. However, the remaining portion was the true essence. Only because the Donglin cloud continent sects couldn't break it open. They could only place it at the side and wait for the day when the spiritual formation would collapse on its own. Or maybe it would start when the experts of the various sects returned. Dragon Canyon was like that. 10 over years ago, after the illusionary effects were broken, people noticed it. However, until now, no one was able to move. Chapter 570. What Zhongsho paid the most attention to was still that dragon. However, after looking carefully for half a day, he was still unable to sense where it was. Instead, he saw numerous evil spirits baring their fangs and claws at him within the mist. There was greed for the flesh and blood of victory, as well as fear and intimidation. Calculating the time, this should be the time when the dragon was in deep sleep and they could enter. Looking around, if it was in the past, Gantian Mountain would have at least 20 military towns stationed here to chase away cultivators. However, not long ago, because they had to go up against the Thousand City Alliance, and then they went all around to attack other cities. The troops here were all moved to him, and at this moment, they still hadn't returned. At this moment, there were hundreds and thousands of cultivators gathered at the borders of the canyon. Their eyes were filled with anticipation, but they were also worried about the remaining restrictions within as well as those evil beings. Some who felt that their strength was decent and were bold didn't bother about anything and directly charged in. Moments later, several screams spread out from within the mist, making one's hair stand on its end. When Lei Dong saw that, he laughed coldly. Bold. This place. Even if the spiritual formation is broken, the two of us wouldn't dare to enter. These people are good, huh? As they say, people die for money, birds die for food. Zhongsho shook his head slightly, taking a few steps out and standing in the middle of the mysterious canyon. Then, a surging sword intent surged for hundreds of miles. This caused the surrounding cultivators to be shocked. When the sword pressed out, the cloud surged, numerous evil beings outside the mist. Most of the people at the borders of the Dragon Canyon were forced back several steps and were unable to get close. Then, they all looked towards where the sword intent came from, adding onto Zhongsho's body. Exclamations sounded out one after another at the borders of the Dragon Canyon. That is Gantian Mountain Zhongsho. That Gantian Mountain Monster King? That Zhongsho who unified Donglin and wiped out mysterious cloud spirit sect, causing Shenxiao to fall? How young? As expected, he came, the peak of sword intent, the head of the 6 ultimate swords. Zhongsho raised his eyebrows and coldly scanned the crowd. Then, He waved his sleeve indifferently. Everyone below the 7th rank. Those who are my people can go back now. Although he saw this in Dragon Canyon as his private property, the spiritual formation treasures here might not fall in his pocket. It would be good if his own people could get it. However, the prerequisite was that these people were truly from Donglin Cloud Continent and had no relations with the various sections. Even if he wasn't willing to work for Gantian Mountain, it didn't matter. Today, as long as one admitted that they were Gantian Mountain people and wanted to enter, they could form cause and effect. In the future, they could think of ways to recruit them. As for the restriction of the 7th level, it was because he couldn't bear to see these low-level cultivators die. In any case, he had already calculated everything in his heart. The cultivators at the edge were all slightly startled and hesitated. However, Zhongsho was too lazy to argue with them. His sword intent rose, and in just a breath's time, it increased by a fraction. Continuously charging, rising vast, brilliant. This place was within his country, and he didn't need to use sword intent or sword soul level strength. Just using King Path martial arts, gathering the thoughts of millions of people to form sword intent, he could suppress all the cultivators here. As time went on, some people whose cultivations weren't high enough all had ashen white faces, knowing that they should retreat. As for those who weren't willing to leave, even if they were grade 7, even if they wanted to leave, they weren't able to. They were all suppressed by the vast King Path sword intent, half kneeling on the ground. Zhongsho seemed to have forgotten about them, like he wanted to see his limits as he continued to raise the sword intent suppression. Slowly, even the mountain rocks around the Dragon Canyon couldn't take it anymore, collapsing and collapsing. Only after 20% of the factionless cultivators said that they were Gantian Mountain people did the heavy pressure disappear. Just as most of them wanted to turn around and leave, leaving far away, a cold voice rang out. In the sky, a cold scoff spread out. So even we can't enter? The voice was dark and sharp, filled with a mocking tone. Zhongsho squinted as he looked towards the direction where the voice came from. This aura should be people from the Demon Path. He casually waved his hand, and a shining grade 8 sword appeared in his hand. Naturally, we can't enter. To make these people willingly leave, it seemed like they had a fight. However, looking at the situation, it didn't seem like it was the Demon Heart sect. That voice turned into a mocking tone. What arrogance. I'm not your Gantian Mountain people, but I want to try whether or not I can enter this Dragon Canyon. The moment those words were said, a red sword glow suddenly flashed behind Zhongsho. A sword flashed, and instantly numerous red lotuses appeared, blooming one by one. In this Dragon Canyon, it seemed like this sword was more and more like a fish in water. Each lotus that bloomed would absorb the power of numerous souls. The heart of the lotus was filled with pure, black, karmic flames. Karmic fire red lotus. Lei Dong and Jinbu Hui were slightly shocked. They both knew that although these flames weren't pure, karmic flames, they were tough to deal with. Formed from vengeful energy, not only could it destroy one's weapon, but it could also infect one's body and soul. It was also the best counter to King Path's secret techniques. Just as he was about to remind him, Zhongsho's brows rose up. Then he didn't bother much, holding the 3-foot green sword in his hand, casually slashing behind him with a sword arc. 2 blade shadows clashed. The entire heaven and earth suddenly swelled outwards, giving out a loud explosion. Even the sound of the weapons clashing was covered by the noise. Then, that red sword shadow was the first to collapse, turning into thousands of pieces and scattering. As for that black karmic fire, it didn't even have time to flutter before it totally disappeared in the air. It was as if it had been completely devoured by something. A person suddenly appeared 10,000 feet away from Zhongsho. He was tossed into the distance. Blood seeped out from his mouth, his eyes filled with shock. Like he was finding it weird why the Black Lotus karmic fire didn't work at all. He instantly scolded out, "The two of you, why aren't you coming out?" However, there was no sound in the sky. It was deathly silent. When he saw Zhong Shou, that ice-cold, knife-like gaze swept over. He couldn't help but feel terrified. You dare to kill me? I am the third-generation direct disciple of Demon Lotus Palace, your Gantian mountain. However, Zhong Shou stabbed over expressionlessly, still casually doing so. It arrived in the air and struck right at his brow. That person hollered, giving up on begging for mercy, taking out a long knife. Thousands of knife shadows suddenly exploded out, locking down the space in front of him. However, no matter how fast his knife shadow was, it was unable to block this bit of sword light. There were no changes. There was only a power that was so strong that no one could resist it. Shatter, shatter, shatter. He destroyed all the saber shadows and scattered them. Then, the tip of the sword pointed at the brow of the red-shirt teen. Those who go against my will be killed. Eh! A shocked exclamation sounded. After Zhong Shou retracted his sword, the red-shirt teen's brow furrowed. However, the body of the teen didn't fall into the Een mist like he originally intended. Instead, it exploded into numerous pieces of flesh and blood. It wasn't that there were other changes, but that his control of his own strength was really bad, which resulted in such a situation happening. After establishing the country, along with the 30-odd provinces of Donglin Cloud Continent, for billion people, the amount of King Path energy that Zhong Shou could use naturally soared, dozens of times more than before. Naturally, it was also more and more difficult to control. It seemed like the effects of the Book of Ian speeding it up weren't that great. It seems like I really need some time to stabilize it. Such a thought flashed across his heart. Zhong Shou didn't bother anymore. Since he couldn't use his skills to break the enemy, then he would use strength to suppress them. Anyways, he had the ability to do so. After killing this person, Zhong Shou smiled as he looked forward. The two of you can come out. Could it be that all of you disagree with this monarch's words? His eyes were unfocused because he knew that the two of them weren't here at all. As expected, moments later, two people appeared. One was thin, his face sickly ashen white. However, he wore a black shirt, making his face look more and more like a dead person. The other was around 20 years old, his body well built. At this moment, his eyes were shining as he looked over coldly. However, his eyes were filled with fear and shock as well as caution. Ruler must be joking. You wiped out mysterious cloud spirit sect, just like that. You also killed demon lotus sect disciples, just like that. How would the two of us dare to offend you? The one who spoke was that dead-faced teen. Then he smiled and asked, We just want to discuss with Ruler. Can't you make an exception? Zhong Shou recognized the voice. It was the person who spoke at the peak of mysterious cloud spirit sect that day. He also smiled. Discuss? Okay, I can make an exception. Originally, he didn't plan to occupy this place alone. The Een Dragon Canyon was huge, with just Gantian Mountain and the factionless cultivators here. When the Een Dragon woke up, they wouldn't be able to explore even 1% of it. There were many restrictions and formations that could only be broken by relying on the strength of these sections. However, the Demon Heart sect can only take 20% of what you get from the Een Dragon Canyon, which meant that if they worked hard, 80% of all the gains would be handed over to Gantian Mountain. That dead-faced teen was instantly silent. This condition was too vicious. He hesitated for a moment before opening his mouth. Ruler, you don't look like you want to discuss. When Zhong Shou heard that, he rolled his eyes. Who wants to discuss with you? If you aren't willing, then scram. No matter how shrewd that dead-faced teen was, he couldn't help but be furious. If it was anyone else, he would have slashed down with his sword. However, the person in front of him was Zhong Shou, the head of the 6 Pinnacle Swords. Zhong Shou, who wiped out the mysterious cloud spirit sect. Zhong Shou, whose sword techniques could go up against the spirit realm, who had 4,000 blood cloud cavalry. Zhong Shou, who was the monster king of Gantian Mountain. Sighing slightly, just as the teen was about to agree, a cold laugh sounded out from the distance. The Een Dragon Canyon ruins were built by the ancient human race ancestors. It belongs to the people of the world. When did it become your Gantian Mountain's private property? That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.